My wife texted, "I want a divorce. All communication through my lawyer." I replied, "Understood." Then I canceled her credit cards, trips, and cut all financial support. 24 hours later, her lawyer was frantically calling me. Look, I'm not saying Monday mornings are universally terrible, but they do have this special talent for kicking you in the teeth when you least expect it. There I was, standing in front of my bathroom mirror at exactly 8:12 a.m., doing the most mundane thing a human being can do, brushing my teeth. I had my electric toothbrush humming away like a tiny jackhammer against my molars, foam building up in the corners of my mouth like I was auditioning for a rabies awareness campaign, when my phone lit up on the counter. The buzz was innocent enough, the kind of notification sound that usually means someone's tagged you in a meme or your credit card company wants to remind you that yes, you did spend $47 at Taco Bell last Tuesday, and no, they're not judging you. But maybe you should be judging yourself. I glanced down at the screen, still mid-brush, still blissfully unaware that my entire existence was about to get drop-kicked into a different dimension. The message was from Sarah, my wife. Well, technically still my wife at that exact moment, though that status was about to have the lifespan of a mayfly. No cute good morning text. No, "Hey babe, can you grab milk on the way home?" Nothing normal. Just 8 words that might as well have been carved into stone tablets and delivered by a very disappointed angel. I want a divorce. All communication through my lawyer. I stood there, toothbrush still vibrating in my hand like it was trying to escape the sheer awkwardness of the situation, and I swear I could feel my brain doing that thing where it completely short-circuits. You know that moment when your computer freezes and the little rainbow, well, just spins and spins? Yeah, that was happening inside my skull. Toothpaste started dripping down my chin in slow motion, and I'm pretty sure I looked like a discount version of the Joker having an existential crisis. No emojis. No explanation. No, "we need to talk," or "I've been thinking," or literally any other sentence that might have softened the blow. Just the emotional equivalent of getting an invoice in the mail. Except this invoice was for the complete demolition of everything I thought I knew about my life. For a solid 30 seconds, I just stared at those words. I read them once, twice, 3 times, hoping maybe autocorrect had seriously screwed up and she'd actually meant, "I want a diversity course," or "I want a devout horse," or literally anything else that made more sense than what I was reading. But nope, the words stayed the same. Divorce. Lawyer. End of discussion. It was like getting fired via text, except instead of losing a job, I was losing a whole person who allegedly loved me at some point. Probably. Maybe, I think. I finally shut off the toothbrush because the buzzing was starting to feel like a metaphor for the screaming inside my head, and I rinsed my mouth out while mentally calculating how many different ways a Monday morning could go wrong. I thought maybe I'd spill coffee on myself, or get stuck in traffic, or realize I'd worn 2 different shoes. You know, normal Monday disasters. Getting divorce texted while covered in Colgate was not on my bingo card. I wiped my mouth with the hand towel, checked my reflection, and saw a guy who looked exactly like me except his eyes had that 1,000-yard stare you usually only see in war documentaries. The thing about shock is that it makes you weirdly calm. Like your brain knows that if it lets you feel everything all at once, you'll probably just collapse into a pile of confused limbs on the bathroom floor. So instead it hits you with this eerie sense of detachment. I looked at my phone again. Read the message one more time. Then I did what any reasonable person would do when their spouse nukes their marriage via text message. I checked to see if she'd blocked me yet. She hadn't. Interesting. So she wanted the divorce, but still wanted to be able to see if I'd respond. Classic having your cake and eating it too behavior. Except the cake was our marriage, and apparently, she'd already decided it tasted like disappointment. By 8:27, I'd wiped the rest of the toothpaste off my face, splashed some cold water on my cheeks for good measure, and stood there gripping the edges of the sink like I was about to deliver a motivational speech to my own reflection. What was I supposed to do here? Beg? Cry? Call her? And ask what the hell happened between last night, when we were watching some terrible reality show about people renovating houses in Idaho, and this morning, when she apparently decided I was disposable? For about 5 seconds, I considered all of those options. Then I remembered something my dad told me once when I was 16 and got dumped by my girlfriend at a Dairy Queen. Son, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Also, Never trust someone who orders their blizzard upside down and then complains when it falls out. I typed back a single word. No paragraph explaining my confusion. No questions about why or how or what I did wrong. No desperate plea for reconsideration. Just one word that felt like closing a book I'd been reading for way too long without realizing the plot had stopped making sense chapters ago. Understood. I hit send and watched the little delivered notification pop up. There. Done. If she wanted it clinical and cold, I could do clinical and cold. I could out-detach her detachment. I could be so calm about this that historians would study my text message response in future relationship courses as an example of next-level emotional composure. Or maybe I was just numb. Hard to tell the difference at 8:28 on a Monday morning when your wife has just informed you via text that your marriage has the same status as a canceled Netflix subscription. Then something clicked in my brain. Not the sad, defeated kind of click. The strategic kind. The kind of click you hear in heist movies right before someone says, "I've got a plan." She wanted all communication through lawyers? Fine. She wanted to make this official and businesslike? Perfect. Two could play this game. Except I was about to play it with the efficiency of someone who actually reads terms and conditions and keeps spreadsheets for fun. I walked out of the bathroom, grabbed my laptop from the bedroom, and sat down at the kitchen table. My coffee from earlier was still warm, which felt like a small miracle in a morning that had otherwise gone completely off the rails. I opened my computer, cracked my knuckles like I was about to hack into the Pentagon, and launch what I would later refer to as Operation Freedom. It had a nice ring to it. Dramatic, sure, but when your spouse divorces you via text while you're battling plaque buildup, you're allowed a little drama. First stop, the joint bank accounts. We had 3 of them, checking, savings, and one we'd opened specifically for vacations that we never actually took, because Sarah always found something more important to spend money on, like another subscription box for artisanal candles or a yoga retreat in Sedona that cost more than my first car. I logged into each one, methodically and carefully, and did what any person protecting their assets would do. I didn't drain them. I'm not a monster. But I did freeze her access to the cards. All of them. Every single piece of plastic that connected to our joint finances got suspended faster than you can say marital assets. Within 20 minutes, I'd contacted the bank, explained the situation with the calm demeanor of someone ordering a sandwich, and had them issue new cards to my address only. Next up, the trips. Oh, the trips. Sarah had approximately 4 vacations booked over the next 6 months, all on the joint credit card, all to places I'd never agreed to go. There was the Bali Girls trip next week with her sister Lauren and 3 friends whose names I could never remember because they all looked like they shopped at the same Instagram boutique. There was a weekend spa retreat in Napa that cost more than my monthly car payment. And there was some kind of wellness festival in Costa Rica that involved sound baths and crystal healing and probably a lot of overpriced smoothies. I went through each booking, found the cancellation policies, and started clicking. Cancel. 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 It was therapeutic, honestly, like popping bubble wrap, except each pop represented hundreds of dollars returning to accounts she could no longer access. The satisfaction was immediate and visceral. I imagined her trying to use her card at Starbucks later and getting that apologetic decline message. I pictured her opening her email to confirm her Bali flight and seeing the cancellation notice. I could practically hear the sound of her artisanal candles shattering in the background of whatever emotional meltdown was about to occur. And honestly, it felt good. Not in a cruel way, but in a natural consequences of your own actions kind of way. She wanted lawyers? She got lawyers. She wanted separation? She got separation. All the way down to the penny. By the time I finished my coffee and closed my laptop, it was barely 9:30 in the morning. I'd been divorce texted, emotionally processed, and financially strategic all before most people had finished their first meeting of the day. I sat back in my chair, looked around my kitchen, our kitchen, though not for much longer, and felt something I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. It wasn't happiness exactly. It wasn't sadness either. It was something else entirely. Peace. Actual, genuine, no strings attached peace. The kind of quiet satisfaction you get when you delete 200 unread work emails in one click and watch that little red notification bubble disappear into nothing. The silence that followed my morning of financial rearranging was, and I mean this sincerely, absolutely priceless. No arguments. No explaining. No justifying why I did what I did. Just me, my coffee, and the sound of my own breathing without someone asking me why I breathe so loud, or if I'm mad about something, or whether I remembered to take out the trash. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt done, like I'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and finally got permission to set it down. I looked at my phone one more time. No new messages. No, wait, I didn't mean it. Or we need to talk about this. Just that original text, sitting there like a tombstone for a relationship that had apparently died without me noticing. And you know what? I was okay with that. More than okay. I was ready. She wanted a divorce. She got a divorce. She wanted lawyers. She got lawyers. She wanted separation. Well, congratulations, Sarah. You got separation with a side of immediate consequences and a garnish of be careful what you wish for. I stood up, rinsed my coffee mug, and started getting ready for work like it was any other Monday. Because at the end of the day, that's exactly what it was. Just another Monday. Except this one came with a bonus plot twist and a masterclass in what happens when you underestimate the guy who pays attention to details, keeps receipts, and knows exactly how to click cancel on 11 different websites before 10 a.m. Game on, Sarah. Game on. By the time noon rolled around, I'd already accomplished more than most people do in a week, and I'm including people who actually have their lives together and use those fancy planners with the motivational quotes on every page. I'd gone to work, sat through a meeting about quarterly projections that I absolutely did not retain a single word of, responded to approximately 47 emails with the kind of professional efficiency that would make a robot jealous, and somehow managed to not mention to a single coworker that my wife had blown up our marriage via text message that morning. Greg from accounting asked me how my weekend was, and I said pretty good, caught up on some shows, which was technically true if you don't count the part where my entire existence got rearranged between brushing my teeth and my second cup of coffee. But the real accomplishment of the morning? I'd retained a lawyer. Not just any lawyer either. I'd gone straight for the big guns. Attorney Bruce Langford, a man whose reputation preceded him like a fog machine at a concert. I'd heard about Bruce through a buddy of mine who'd gone through a messy divorce 2 years ago and came out the other side with his house, his dog, and his dignity somehow intact, which in divorce terms is basically winning the lottery. My buddy had described Bruce as the kind of guy who smiles like he eats subpoenas for breakfast and washes them down with the tears of opposing counsel, which honestly sounded exactly like what I needed. I'd called Bruce's office at 9:47 a.m., right after my morning of financial reorganization, and his secretary, a woman named Diane who sounded like she'd heard every sob story in the book and was thoroughly unimpressed by all of them, had somehow squeezed me in for an 11:30 appointment. "You're lucky," she'd said in a tone that suggested I was anything but lucky. "Someone just canceled. Be here on time, or you lose the slot." "Yes, ma'am." I'd shown up at 11:23, sat in a waiting room that had leather chairs nicer than my couch and magazines from this actual month instead of 2019, and waited for my name to be called like I was about to see the principal. Bruce's office was exactly what you'd expect from a lawyer who charges more per hour than most people make in a day. Dark wood everything, law books lining the walls like he'd raided a library, and a desk so big you could land a small aircraft on it. The man himself was in his mid-50s, gray hair perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than my wedding did, and these sharp blue eyes that looked like they could see right through whatever story you were about to tell him and identify the 3 parts you were lying about. He shook my hand with the grip of someone who'd never lost an arm wrestling match in his life and gestured for me to sit. "Mark, right? Diane said you've got a situation." He sat down, folded his hands on his desk like a movie villain about to explain his master plan, and waited. No small talk. No, "How are you feeling?" or "This must be difficult." Just straight to business, which honestly I appreciated more than any of the sympathy I'd been dreading all morning. I pulled out my phone and showed him the text. The divorce text. The one that had already become seared into my brain like a bad tattoo. Bruce read it, and I watched his face for some kind of reaction. Shock, sympathy, maybe even a wince of secondhand embarrassment. Nothing. The man had a poker face that would make professional gamblers weep with envy. He handed my phone back and leaned back in his chair, the kind of lean that said he'd seen this exact scenario about 400 times before. "And what did you do after receiving this?" he asked, his voice calm and measured, like he was asking me what I'd had for breakfast instead of how I'd responded to my marriage imploding. I told him everything. The frozen accounts, the canceled trips, the strategic separation of finances that I'd executed with the precision of someone who'd been waiting for an excuse to organize something. I explained about the Bali trip, the spa weekends, the joint credit cards that were now very much not joint. I showed him screenshots, timestamps, confirmation emails. I brought receipts, literal and figurative, and I laid them all out like I was presenting evidence at trial. Bruce listened to the whole thing without interrupting once, which was unnerving because most people can't go 30 seconds without interjecting with their own opinion or story about their cousin's neighbor's divorce. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, just looking at me with those sharp eyes, and I started to wonder if maybe I'd overdone it. Maybe I'd been too aggressive. Maybe I should have just curled up in a ball and cried like a normal person instead of going full financial lockdown before my morning coffee had even worn off. Then Bruce smiled. Not a big smile, but enough of one that I could see it. "You're calm," he said, like he was observing a rare species of bird. "I like that. Calm men are dangerous." I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning, but I decided to take it as the former because I needed a win today, and I'd take it wherever I could get it. Bruce started asking questions. When did we get married? Any kids? Whose name was on the house? What assets did we have? Were there any prenups? And I answered everything as straightforwardly as possible. No kids. Thank God. Because the idea of having to co-parent with someone who divorce texted me was nightmare fuel. The house was in both our names. No prenup, because we'd gotten married young and stupid and thought love was enough, which in retrospect was adorable and idiotic in equal measure. "Here's what we're going to do," Bruce said, pulling out a legal pad and starting to write notes in handwriting that looked like it belonged in a doctor's office. "You did the right thing protecting your assets. Don't touch anything else. Don't contact her. Don't respond to her family. Don't post anything on social media. I don't care if it's a meme about the weather, don't do it. Everything goes through me now. Understood?" "Understood," I said, which seemed to be my word of the day. "Good. I'll file a response to her petition, we'll start discovery, and we'll see what she's actually asking for. My guess? She's expecting you to roll over. People who send divorce texts usually are." He looked up from his notes, and that slight smile was back. They don't expect the other person to have their ducks in a row before lunch. I left Bruce's office at 12:14 p.m. feeling something I hadn't expected to feel, confident. Not happy, not sad, just confident. Like I'd hired the right person for the job and could actually trust someone else to handle the legal nightmare while I focused on not losing my mind. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat for a minute, and realized I was hungry. Not just regular hungry, but the kind of hungry you get when you've had the most insane morning of your life and your body is like, "Hey, remember me? I need fuel and also maybe therapy, but let's start with food." I drove home, to my house, which was still my house and would remain my house if Bruce had anything to say about it, and walked into a kitchen that felt different somehow. Quieter, emptier, but not in a sad way, just in a factual way. Sarah's coffee mug wasn't in the sink. Her laptop wasn't on the counter surrounded by 17 open tabs of online shopping sites. Her shoes weren't kicked off by the door in that way that always made me trip over them. It was just my space now, and I could do whatever I wanted with it. I made myself a turkey sandwich. Not because I'm some kind of culinary genius, but because turkey sandwiches are simple and reliable and don't require you to think too hard, which was good because my brain had already done enough thinking for one day. I used the good bread, the kind Sarah always said was too expensive, but I bought anyway because sometimes you need bread that doesn't taste like cardboard. I added lettuce, tomato, a little mayo, some mustard, and a slice of cheese that may or may not have been past its prime but smelled fine, so I went with it. No drama. No crying into my coffee. No standing in the kitchen wondering where everything went wrong. Just me, my sandwich, and a legal plan that was already in motion. I ate at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone and deliberately not looking at Sarah's Instagram, because that way lay madness and probably a lot of vague posting about betrayal or strength or whatever divorced people post about when they're trying to look philosophical. Instead, I opened up my banking app and looked at the accounts I'd reorganized that morning. Everything was clean, separated, organized. My money was my money. Her money would be her money once the lawyers figured out the split. No more joint anything except maybe joint custody of the Netflix account. And honestly, she could have it. I'd get my own. At 2 p.m., I did something that felt weirdly powerful. I logged into every subscription service we shared and started canceling. The spa membership that cost $200 a month and that I'd never used once because I'm not a hot stone massage and cucumber water kind of guy. Canceled. The meal kit delivery service that sent us ingredients for recipes we never cooked because we always ended up ordering pizza instead. Canceled. The premium streaming service that Sarah used to watch reality shows about people dramatically falling in love on tropical islands. Canceled. The airline frequent flyer account that was tied to our joint credit card and had enough miles banked for that Bali trip. I called them, explained there'd been fraudulent activity on the account, which wasn't technically a lie because I definitely hadn't authorized a girl's trip to Bali, and they froze everything pending investigation. Thank you for catching this, sir, the customer service rep said, sounding genuinely grateful that I'd caught the fraud. You're welcome, I said, and I meant it. I was very welcome. The most welcome I'd been in months. By the time I finished my sandwich and my afternoon of subscription cancellations, something had shifted. For the first time in years, and I mean years, plural, like at least 3 or 4, I felt something strange and unfamiliar creeping into my chest. It wasn't happiness exactly. It wasn't relief either. It was quiet satisfaction. The kind of feeling you get when you delete 200 unread work emails in one click and watch that notification number drop to 0. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you did everything right, everything smart, and everything necessary. I'd been divorce texted at 8:12 a.m., and by 2:30 p.m., I had a lawyer, a plan, and a turkey sandwich. If that wasn't winning, I didn't know what was. Tuesday, 2:17 p.m. I was in the middle of a relatively peaceful work-from-home afternoon, responding to emails about budget allocations and pretending to care about a PowerPoint presentation someone had sent me with the subject line, urgent, please review ASAP. Even though nothing in corporate America has ever truly been urgent except maybe that one time someone microwaved fish in the break room, and we had to evacuate. I had my laptop open, a fresh cup of coffee next to me, and I was actually starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I could get through one full day without my personal life exploding into a dumpster fire of drama and complications. That's when my phone rang. Not buzzed. Not pinged. Rang. With the actual ringtone I'd assigned to Sarah's family members, which was unfortunately the default iPhone sound because I'd never bothered to customize it into something more accurate, like an air raid siren or the Jaws theme. I looked at the screen and saw the name I'd been half expecting but fully dreading, Lauren. Sarah's sister, also known as the family megaphone. Also known as the woman who'd cornered me at Thanksgiving 3 years ago to tell me I wasn't supporting Sarah's dreams because I'd suggested that maybe starting a candle business called Wicked Good Vibes wasn't the most financially sound investment when we had credit card debt. I stared at the phone for a solid 5 rings, watching it vibrate across my desk like it was trying to escape, and I seriously considered letting it go to voicemail. But here's the thing about people like Lauren. If you don't answer, they just call back. And back. And back. They'll call 17 times in a row and then text you, "Are you okay?" Like the only possible reason you didn't answer is because you're currently being attacked by bears. So I took a deep breath, prepared myself for whatever verbal assault was about to come through my speaker, and answered. "Hello, Lauren. What the hell did you do, Mark?" Her voice came through so loud, I actually had to pull the phone away from my ear. I'm talking air horn levels of volume. She sounded like a sports commentator who'd just watched their team lose in overtime. Except the team was her sister, and the game was my marriage, and apparently, I was the villain who'd sabotaged the whole thing. I took a sip of my coffee, mostly to buy myself 3 seconds of time to formulate a response that wouldn't immediately escalate this into a full-blown screaming match. I did exactly what Sarah asked me to do, Lauren. All communication through lawyers. That's a direct quote, by the way. Would you like me to forward you the text? There was a pause on the other end, and I could practically hear her brain trying to process the fact that I wasn't immediately apologizing or begging for forgiveness or doing whatever it was she'd expected me to do. She's crying, Mark. She's been crying all day. She can't access any of her accounts. Her trip got canceled. She has no money. Then maybe she should text her lawyer, I said, keeping my voice as calm and level as someone ordering a sandwich at Subway. I'm not customer support. She wanted separation. She got separation. All the way down to the bank accounts. You're being cruel. Lauren's voice had reached that pitch that only dogs and dolphins can usually hear. She made a mistake. She was emotional. You can't just cut her off like this. Actually, Lauren, I can. And I did. And it's not cruel, it's logical. She said she wanted a divorce and all communication through lawyers. So that's what she's getting. Divorce and lawyers. It's like ordering a combo meal. You get what you asked for. I was being petty. I knew I was being petty. But honestly, after 24 hours of having my entire life rearranged, I'd earned a little pettiness. I'd earned a whole pettiness buffet. She didn't mean it like that. She just needed space. Then she should have said I need space, not I want a divorce. Words mean things, Lauren. I know that's a wild concept, but when someone texts you I want a divorce, it's generally not code for, let's take a week to think things over. I could feel my blood pressure rising, which was annoying because I'd been so calm up until this point. I'd been the picture of composed rationality. But there's something about being told that you're the bad guy for following someone else's explicit instructions that really gets under your skin. Lauren huffed into the phone, one of those dramatic exhales that people do when they want you to know they think you're being unreasonable. You know what, Mark? You're being a child about this. A petty, vindictive child. And yet I'm the one who hired a lawyer and protected my assets instead of sending divorce texts at 8 a.m. like I'm breaking up with someone via post-it note. Funny how that works. I was done. Completely done. Look, Lauren, I appreciate you calling to yell at me. Truly, it's been a highlight of my afternoon. But like I told Sarah, all communication through lawyers. That includes her flying monkeys. Flying monkeys? Are you seriously? Have a great day, Lauren. Say hi to your husband for me. And I hung up. Just clicked the red button and ended the call like I was canceling yet another subscription service I didn't need. My hand was shaking a little bit. Not from anger exactly, but from that adrenaline rush you get when you stand up for yourself after years of just nodding along to keep the peace. It felt good. Scary but good. Like jumping off a diving board when you're not entirely sure how deep the water is, but you're already in the air, so there's no going back now. I set my phone down on my desk, face down, because I knew Lauren well enough to know she'd either call back immediately or text me a novel about how disappointed she was in me and how Sarah deserved better and blah blah blah. I didn't want to see it. Not right now. Maybe not ever. I went back to my laptop, tried to focus on the budget allocation spreadsheet that definitely still wasn't urgent despite what the email subject line claimed, and poured myself more coffee because this day required caffeine levels that probably weren't FDA approved. For about 45 minutes, everything was quiet. Peaceful even. I finished the spreadsheet, sent it off with a note that said, per your request, even though nobody had actually requested it in those words, and started organizing my inbox by priority. Then, right as I was starting to relax again, my email pinged. Not a work email. A personal one. Subject line. Urgent spousal financial interference. Oh, this was going to be good. I opened it and found a message from Sarah's lawyer. A guy named Richard Chun who I'd never met, but whose email signature had approximately 15 credentials after his name, like he was collecting letters of the alphabet as a hobby. The email was 3 paragraphs of legal jargon that basically boiled down to: your client has engaged in financial abuse by cutting off access to joint accounts and canceling shared expenses without notice or consultation, causing severe emotional and financial distress to my client. And if this continues, we'll be forced to pursue emergency injunctive relief. Financial abuse. They were calling it financial abuse. I read that line 3 times to make sure I wasn't having a stroke or hallucinating or somehow misunderstanding basic English. The woman who'd divorce texted me and demanded all communication go through lawyers was now claiming I was abusing her by following her instructions. The mental gymnastics required for that argument deserved an Olympic gold medal. I laughed. Not a little chuckle, but a full-on, head thrown back, nearly spilled my coffee laugh that echoed through my empty house and probably made my neighbors wonder if I'd finally lost it. Then I did what any reasonable person with receipts, screenshots, and a lawyer who charged by the hour would do. I hit reply, attached every single piece of evidence I had: bank statements, text message screenshots with timestamps, cancellation confirmations, the original divorce text in all its 8:12 a.m. glory, and wrote a response so polite and professional it could have been used as a template in a business communication course. Dear Mr. Chun, Please find attached documentation showing that all account modifications were made in direct response to your client's explicit request for divorce and lawyer-only communication. The attached text message clearly shows her directive. All actions taken were to protect assets during a separation that she initiated. Additionally, you'll find confirmation that essential expenses including groceries were maintained and delivered to her residence. I have CC'd my attorney, Bruce Langford, for his review. Best regards, Mark. I copied Bruce on the email, hit send, and sat back in my chair feeling like I'd just submitted the final paper for a class I was definitely getting an A in. The documentation was flawless. The timeline was clear. The evidence was irrefutable. I'd done everything by the book. Her book, specifically, the one where she wrote the rules, and I just followed them to the letter. Bruce replied 5 minutes later. 5 minutes. The man was either glued to his email or had some kind of lawyer sense that tingled whenever someone sent him something good. His response was 2 words, outstanding. Do absolutely nothing else. I didn't need to be told twice. I closed my laptop, finished my coffee, and spent the rest of the evening doing exactly nothing related to my divorce. I watched TV, a documentary about deep-sea creatures that was weirdly calming because at least those fish had their lives figured out. I made dinner. Pasta with Jared sauce because I wasn't trying to be Gordon Ramsay, just trying to eat something that wasn't a sandwich. I even did laundry, which felt weirdly therapeutic in a look at me being a functional adult kind of way. That night, I slept like a retired hitman. You know that sleep where you're out before your head fully hits the pillow and you don't wake up once until your alarm goes off. That kind of sleep. The kind of sleep you can only get when you know, deep in your bones, that you did everything right and the other person has absolutely no ammunition left to use against you. No guilt, no second-guessing, no lying awake wondering if you overreacted. Just pure, uninterrupted, blissfully dreamless sleep. When I woke up Wednesday morning, I checked my phone out of habit. No missed calls from Lauren. She'd apparently given up after the first attempt, which was shocking because that woman had the persistence of a telemarketer with a quota to hit. No emails from Richard Chun. No text from Sarah. Not that I expected any since she'd made it very clear we were doing this through lawyers. Just my regular morning notifications, weather forecast, a reminder about a dentist appointment next week, and a news alert about something happening in Congress that I definitely didn't have the energy to read about. I got up, made coffee, and stood in my kitchen looking out the window at a perfectly ordinary Wednesday morning. Birds were chirping. The sun was coming up. The neighbor across the street was walking his dog like he did every morning at exactly 7:15. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. And for the first time since Monday morning at 8:12 a.m., I felt something that wasn't shock or strategic planning or caffeinated determination. I felt free. Wednesday morning started with the kind of peace I'd forgotten existed. No divorce texts. No screaming phone calls from in-laws. No emergency legal emails accusing me of crimes against basic human decency. Just me, my coffee, and the sports section of the news app that I scrolled through while eating toast like a completely normal person living a completely normal life. I was almost starting to believe that maybe the worst was over. Maybe Sarah and her lawyer had looked at the evidence, realized they had absolutely no leg to stand on, and decided to just move forward with a quiet, dignified divorce where we split everything 50-50 and never spoke to each other again, except maybe awkward nods at mutual friends' weddings 10 years from now. Yeah, that fantasy lasted until about 10:47 a.m. I was at work, actual work, in the office, because I'd decided that sitting at home was starting to make me feel like a hermit who'd forgotten how to interact with humans, when my phone buzzed with a text from Bruce. Call me when you have a minute. Her lawyer reached out again. It's creative. Creative. When a lawyer uses the word creative to describe the opposition strategy, it's never good. It's like when a doctor says your test results are interesting, or when a mechanic says your car is making a unique sound. I excused myself from a meeting about marketing strategies that I wasn't paying attention to anyway. Sorry, Janet. Your ideas about increasing social media engagement are fine, but my marriage is currently imploding, and stepped into an empty conference room to call Bruce back. Mark, Bruce answered on the first ring, and I could hear the barely contained amusement in his voice. So, Richard Chun called me this morning. Apparently, your wife is now claiming she has no groceries, no gas money, no internet access, and is basically being financially trapped in her apartment like some kind of prisoner. I blinked, stared at the wall of the conference room where someone had left a motivational poster that said, "Teamwork makes the dream work," in aggressive cursive. No groceries? No groceries. She told her lawyer she can't even afford basic necessities and that you've cut her off completely, leaving her destitute and unable to survive. Bruce paused, and I could practically hear him grinning through the phone, which would be a compelling argument if it were remotely true. But it's not true, I said slowly, my brain already connecting the dots. Because I literally scheduled a grocery delivery to her place on Monday afternoon. $200 worth of food. All her favorites. Organic everything because God forbid she eat regular peasant vegetables like the rest of us. I know, Bruce said, and now he was definitely laughing. Because you're meticulous and you keep receipts like you're preparing for an audit by the IRS and the FBI simultaneously. Do you happen to have confirmation of that delivery? I have a screenshot of the order, the delivery confirmation with a timestamp, and probably a photo of the bags on her doorstep because the delivery service sends those now. I was already pulling up my email on my phone, scrolling through to find the receipt. She's lying. She's straight up lying to her lawyer. Oh, I know she's lying. But here's the fun part. Her lawyer doesn't know she's lying. He called me all righteous indignation, talking about how his client is suffering and we need to remedy this immediately or they'll be filing an emergency motion for temporary support. Bruce sounded like he was having the time of his life. So I'm going to email him the delivery confirmation with the timestamp and the itemized list showing sparkling water, avocados, that fancy cheese that costs like $20 a pound, and everything else you ordered. I found the email and forwarded it to Bruce immediately. Sent. She's going to look ridiculous. She already looks ridiculous. But now she's going to look like a liar, which is much worse in front of a judge. Bruce was quiet for a second, probably reviewing the receipt I'd just sent. Mark, you ordered her groceries before she even complained about not having groceries. You're either psychic or you're the most prepared divorcing spouse I've ever had. I'm not psychic. I just know Sarah. She's great at creating problems that don't exist so she can be the victim of them. I walked over to the window of the conference room, looking out at the parking lot where people were living their normal lives, going to lunch, checking their phones, completely unaware that somewhere in this building a guy was fighting a grocery war with his soon-to-be ex-wife. Bruce said he'd handle it and hung up, leaving me standing there with my phone in my hand and a growing sense of bewilderment at how absurd this entire situation had become. We weren't fighting over custody of kids or a family business or some priceless heirloom. We were fighting over whether or not she had access to organic kale. This was my life now. This was what my marriage had devolved into. I went back to my desk, tried to focus on actual work, and failed miserably because my brain was now stuck on the image of Richard Chin opening Bruce's email and realizing his client had just made him look like an idiot. About an hour later, Bruce forwarded me the email chain, and it was absolutely glorious. He'd sent the grocery receipt with a subject line that just said client necessities, and included a polite message that basically amounted to, as you can see from the attached documentation, my client proactively arranged for groceries to be delivered to your client's residence, including organic produce, sparkling water, and various other items she regularly purchases. The delivery was completed on Monday at 3:47 p.m., as confirmed by the attached photo of the bags at her doorstep. Please let me know if you need any additional documentation regarding my client's continued support of basic necessities. The photo. Oh man, the photo. There was Sarah's doorstep, clear as day, with 4 reusable shopping bags filled with food sitting right there in front of her door. You could even see the organic bananas poking out of one bag. Bruce had really gone for the kill with that one. Richard Chin's response came 2 hours later, and it was about 3 paragraphs shorter than his previous emails. Thank you for the clarification. We'll review this with our client and follow up as needed. Translation: my client lied to me, and now I look stupid, and I'm going to have a very uncomfortable conversation with her about what no groceries actually means. I saved that email in a folder I'd created called Evidence because I had a feeling this wasn't going to be the last time Sarah decided that reality was optional and drama was mandatory. Then I did something that felt weirdly petty and satisfying. I ordered her another grocery delivery. Same store, same organic everything, another $200 worth of food. Because if she was going to claim she was starving, I was going to make absolutely sure she had enough avocado toast ingredients to last through the apocalypse. Later that afternoon, Katie texted me. Katie, the mutual friend who'd somehow gotten caught in the middle of this divorce despite her best efforts to remain neutral. She was one of those people who wanted everyone to just get along and couldn't understand why sometimes getting along simply wasn't an option. Her text was short and to the point. She says you're being cruel. I stared at that message for a good 30 seconds, debating how to respond. I could ignore it. I could send a lengthy explanation of everything that had happened. I could forward her the entire email chain with Bruce and Richard Chun so she could see exactly how cruel I was being by ensuring my soon-to-be ex-wife had access to organic groceries and sparkling water. Instead, I went with the simplest option. I'm just following orders. She said lawyer only. I'm being obedient for once. 3 dots appeared, like Katie was typing a response. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. Then disappeared again. I could practically see her sitting there, phone in hand, trying to figure out how to navigate this conversation without making anyone mad. Finally, she just sent back a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No commentary, no taking sides, just a thumbs-up that could have meant literally anything from I understand to I give up trying to mediate this situation. Katie didn't reply after that. She probably went back to her normal life, where people communicated like adults and didn't divorce text each other at 8 a.m. or lie about grocery access to their lawyers. I didn't blame her for ghosting the situation. If I wasn't living through this, I'd probably distance myself from it too. Divorce brings out a weird side of people, and nobody wants to get caught in the crossfire when someone starts launching accusations about organic produce. I spent the rest of the workday actually being productive, which felt novel and strange after 3 days of legal chaos. I finished a project that had been sitting on my desk for 2 weeks. I organized my email inbox down to 0 unread messages. I even cleaned out my desk drawer and found like 6 pens that had run out of ink, a bunch of old receipts, because apparently I keep receipts for everything, not just divorce evidence. And a motivational stress ball someone had given me at a company retreat that said squeeze the day in faded letters. By the time I left the office at 5:30, I felt surprisingly normal. Like maybe I could do this. Maybe I could navigate a divorce while still maintaining my job and my sanity and my ability to order groceries like a functional human being. I drove home listening to a podcast about true crime because nothing makes your own life drama feel manageable like hearing about people who committed actual crimes instead of just marriage crimes. When I got home, I checked my email one more time, force of habit at this point, and saw another message from Bruce. Update. Her lawyer has gone suspiciously quiet. No more emergency motions, no more desperate phone calls. I think the grocery incident may have convinced them to take a different approach. Good work, keeping documentation. Good work, keeping documentation. That was my life now. Getting praised by my lawyer for being organized enough to prove I'd purchased organic groceries. I should put that on my resume. Skilled at maintaining detailed records of produce purchases during marital dissolution. I made dinner, chicken and rice, nothing fancy, just something that required me to actually cook and think about measurements and timing instead of dwelling on the absurdity of my current situation. While I ate, I thought about Sarah sitting in her apartment, surrounded by the groceries I'd ordered, probably crafting her next complaint to her lawyer. No internet access, maybe, or no streaming services. Or the apartment was too cold because I'd somehow remotely controlled the thermostat through sheer spite. The thing was, I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt done. Like I'd been playing a game where someone kept changing the rules every 5 minutes, and I'd finally just stopped playing altogether. She wanted a divorce? Great. Here's your divorce with a side of organic groceries and documented delivery confirmations. She wanted to complain about being financially trapped? Cool. Here's $200 of food showing up at your door twice a week, whether you like it or not. I finished my dinner, washed the dishes, and sat down on my couch with a beer, just one, because I wasn't trying to develop a drinking problem on top of a divorce problem, and thought about how much quieter my house was now. Not sad quiet. Just quiet. Peaceful even. No one asking me why I was watching this show, or whether I'd remembered to do some chore I'd definitely forgotten about, or commenting on how I was sitting wrong on my own couch. Just me, my beer, and the satisfaction of knowing that somewhere across town, Richard Chun was probably having a very awkward conversation with his client about the importance of telling your lawyer the truth, especially when the other side has receipts. Literally. Thursday morning, 10:42 a.m. I was in the middle of a Teams meeting with people from 3 different departments talking about synergy and paradigm shifts and other corporate buzzwords that don't actually mean anything but make everyone feel productive. My camera was on, I was nodding at appropriate intervals, and I'd perfected the art of looking engaged while mentally being somewhere else entirely, specifically wondering if I should get Thai food or pizza for lunch. That's when my phone, sitting face down on my desk just out of frame, started buzzing with that persistent vibration that meant someone was calling me, and they really wanted to talk. I glanced down and saw Bruce's name. Bruce didn't call unless it was important or entertaining, and at this point in my divorce journey, those two things had become basically the same. I did that thing where you pretend your Wi-Fi is cutting out, made an apologetic face at my webcam, and said, "Sorry guys, I'm losing connection. I'll catch up via email," before immediately closing the laptop and answering my phone. "Please tell me this is good news," I said, skipping the pleasantries because Bruce and I were past that point now. We'd entered that phase of our professional relationship where we could just get straight to it. "Oh, it's better than good news," Bruce said, and I could hear him trying not to laugh. "I'm forwarding you a voicemail right now. Put me on speaker and listen to it." I did what he asked, putting my phone on speaker and waiting while he sent the file. A few seconds later, it came through, and I pressed play. What I heard was Richard Chin's voice, except instead of the confident, slightly condescending tone he'd had in all his previous communications, he sounded like a man who'd just realized he'd walked into a surprise exam he hadn't studied for. His voice was shaky, uncertain, like someone trying to give directions when they're completely lost themselves. "Mr. Langford, this is Richard Chun calling on behalf of Sarah Peterson. I'm, reaching out because we need to discuss the current situation. My client has expressed some concerns about the ongoing financial arrangements, and we feel it would be beneficial to, renegotiate some of the terms we initially proposed. If you could please have your client contact me directly, or if you and I could speak directly, that would be greatly appreciated. This is somewhat urgent. Thank you." I listened to it twice, then a third time, because it was honestly that satisfying. The man sounded like he was calling from the Titanic after it had already hit the iceberg. "He wants to renegotiate," I said, stating the obvious, but needing to say it out loud to fully appreciate it. "He wants to renegotiate," Bruce confirmed, and now he wasn't even trying to hide his amusement. "Mark, do you know what that means?" "That means they cracked. They cracked faster than microwave popcorn. We're 4 days into this divorce, and they're already backpedaling." I sat back in my desk chair, staring at the ceiling and trying to process what I was hearing. For days. It had been exactly 4 days since Sarah had sent that text message while I was brushing my teeth, and already her legal strategy, if you could even call it that, was falling apart like a house of cards in a windstorm. What happened? I mean, besides the grocery thing, which was already pretty spectacular. Bruce made a sound that was half laugh, half snort. "What happened is reality set in. Your wife thought she could text you 'I want a divorce,' cut off communication, and still have access to all the joint finances and lifestyle she's been enjoying. She thought you'd either beg her to come back or just roll over and keep paying for everything while she figured out her next move. She did not expect divorce mode you to also mean budget cut you." "Budget cut me is very efficient," I said, because it was true. I'd spent years managing our finances, tracking expenses, making sure bills got paid on time, and apparently all that time I'd been training for this exact moment without even knowing it. So what now? Do I call him back? Do we negotiate? "Absolutely not," Bruce said firmly. "We do nothing. We've done nothing wrong. We have all the documentation, and they're the ones panicking. When the other side is spiraling, you don't throw them a rope. You let them keep spiraling until they're ready to have a real conversation about realistic terms." He paused, and I could hear him typing something on his keyboard. "Her lawyer now realizes that his client expected drama and got discipline instead. She wanted you to react emotionally, and you reacted strategically. That's throwing them off their entire game." I thought about that for a second. Drama versus discipline. It was pretty accurate, actually. Sarah had always been the one who operated on feelings and impulses and grand gestures. She'd make big declarations about what she wanted or needed, and I'd spend the next week figuring out how to actually make those things happen in reality. She'd say, "I want to go to Italy," and I'd research flights and hotels and exchange rates. She'd say, "I want to start a business," and I'd create a budget and a business plan. She provided the vision. I provided the logistics. Except this time, her vision was a divorce, and my logistics involved making sure I didn't get financially destroyed in the process. "So we just wait?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. We wait. We let them sweat. And when they come back with actual reasonable proposals instead of demands for $6,000 a month in temporary support, then we'll talk. Bruce sounded like a chess player who'd just put his opponent in check and was waiting to see how they'd try to get out of it. In the meantime, keep doing exactly what you're doing. Don't contact her. Don't respond to her family. Don't engage with the drama. You're winning by being boring, Mark. Keep being boring. Winning by being boring. That should have been depressing, but somehow it wasn't. It was actually kind of perfect. I'd spent years trying to be interesting enough, fun enough, spontaneous enough for Sarah. Meanwhile, boring, predictable, organized me was apparently the version that was most effective at navigating a divorce. Go figure. After I hung up with Bruce, I sat at my desk for a few minutes, just processing everything. The voicemail played again in my head. Richard Chin's shaky voice asking to renegotiate. The uncertainty, the barely concealed panic. 4 days ago, they'd come out swinging with accusations of financial abuse and emergency motions and demands for thousands of dollars a month. Now they were calling and asking to talk. The shift was dramatic, and it was entirely because Sarah hadn't thought I'd actually go through with it. She'd thought the divorce text was a power move, something that would make me scramble and beg and promise to change. Instead, I'd responded with "understood" and a series of strategic financial decisions that had apparently never occurred to her as a possibility. I opened my laptop and sent Bruce a quick email. Heard the voicemail. Hilarious. Let me know when they're ready to be realistic. In the meantime, I'll be over here being boring and organized. Then I actually went back to work, because unlike some people, I had a job to do and responsibilities to handle and a life that didn't revolve around creating problems just to see how other people would react. That night, I celebrated. Not in a big way. I wasn't popping champagne or throwing a party or doing anything that would end up on social media where Sarah's spy network of friends could screenshot it and send it to her as evidence of my cruelty. I just made myself a steak. A good one, too. Not the cheap grocery store kind, but an actual nice ribeye from the butcher counter that I seasoned properly and cooked to perfect medium rare. I made mashed potatoes from scratch, not the instant kind. I steamed some vegetables because I'm a functioning adult who understands the food pyramid. And then I sat down at my dining room table, alone, and enjoyed every single bite. While I ate, I put on Netflix. Not anything Sarah would have wanted to watch. No reality shows about people finding love on tropical islands or home renovation programs where couples argue about shiplap. I watched a documentary about space exploration, something I actually found interesting, and I didn't have to explain to anyone why I thought Mars rovers were cool or defend my choice of entertainment. The piece was so profound I almost felt guilty about it. Almost, but not quite. After dinner, I cleaned up my dishes, wiped down the kitchen counters, and made myself a cup of coffee because I'm one of those weirdos who drinks coffee at night and somehow still sleeps fine. I took my coffee to the living room, sat on the couch, and realized something that would have seemed impossible 4 days ago. I was happy. Not in a jumping up and down, shouting from the rooftops kind of way, but in a quiet, settled, this is actually okay kind of way. The apartment was quiet. Nobody was asking me questions or starting conversations during the good parts of shows or commenting on how I was sitting wrong on furniture I'd paid for. It was just peaceful. My phone buzzed with a text from my buddy Mike, the one who'd recommended Bruce in the first place. "How's it going with the divorce? You holding up okay?" I typed back. Her lawyer just called mine asking to renegotiate. 4 days in, and they're already backing down. Bruce says they're panicking. Mike's response came immediately. "Ha ha ha ha. Told you Bruce was worth every penny. You doing the thing where you stay calm and organized." Yeah, apparently I'm winning by being boring. That's the best way to win. Let me know if you need anything. Also, drinks this weekend if you're free. I told him I'd let him know and set my phone down, smiling at the idea of Mike's reaction to all of this. He'd been through his own divorce horror story, complete with a wife who tried to claim their dog as a dependent on her taxes and a custody battle over a timeshare in Florida that neither of them even liked. Compared to that, my situation was relatively tame. No kids, no pets, no timeshares. Just two people who'd apparently forgotten how to like each other, and one of them had decided to end it via text message like we were teenagers breaking up after prom. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and stood in my kitchen looking around at a space that was starting to feel more like mine and less like ours. The coffee maker Sarah had insisted we needed, even though the old one worked fine. The cabinet full of mugs from various vacations and gift shops. The refrigerator covered in magnets that said things like live, laugh, love, and good vibes only. I walked over and started removing magnets, one by one, dropping them into a drawer. If Sarah wanted them later, she could have them. But I was done living in a space that looked like it had been decorated by a Pinterest board having an identity crisis. That night, I went to bed at a reasonable hour, set my alarm like a responsible adult, and thought about Richard Chin's voicemail one more time. The shakiness in his voice. The uncertainty. The barely concealed, oh crap, what do we do now energy. They'd expected me to fall apart, and instead I'd just handled it. Like an adult. Like someone who understood that when someone tells you they want a divorce, you don't argue or beg or try to change their mind. You say, understood, you protect yourself, and you move forward. I pulled up my phone one last time before going to sleep and saw that Bruce had sent me another text. Sleep well. Tomorrow we do absolutely nothing, which is somehow the most powerful move we can make. I smiled, set my phone on the nightstand, and closed my eyes. Somewhere across town, Sarah and Richard Chun were probably having frantic conversations about strategy and next moves and how to handle the fact that I wasn't playing by their script. Meanwhile, I was here, in my quiet apartment, sleeping like someone who'd just won the opening round of a fight he didn't even want to be in. Winning by being boring. I could live with that. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a courtroom that looked exactly like every courtroom you've ever seen on TV, except smaller and way less dramatic. No jury box full of citizens doing their civic duty. No gallery packed with reporters scribbling notes. Just a handful of people waiting for their own legal proceedings. A bailiff who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. And me in a suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion, because Bruce had told me, dress like you're going to a job interview for a position you actually want. So there I was, navy suit, blue tie, looking like someone who had their life together, even though internally I was running through a mental checklist of everything that could possibly go wrong. Bruce sat next to me, looking completely relaxed in that way that lawyers do when they know they're holding all the good cards. He had his briefcase open on the table in front of us, papers organized into color-coded folders because apparently I wasn't the only one who found comfort in excessive organization. He'd spent the last 2 weeks preparing for this hearing like he was prepping for a murder trial instead of a temporary support motion, and I'd provided him with enough documentation to build a fort. Bank statements, expense reports, text messages, grocery receipts, cancellation confirmations. Everything was there, time-stamped and categorized and ready to be deployed like legal ammunition. At exactly 2:47 p.m., the door on the opposite side of the courtroom opened, and Sarah walked in with Richard Chun trailing behind her looking significantly less confident than he'd sounded in those early emails. But Sarah, oh man, Sarah had dressed for this hearing like she was attending a funeral for our marriage and wanted everyone to know she was the grieving widow. Black dress that probably cost more than my suit. Oversized sunglasses even though we were indoors and there was literally no sun to block, and this tragic sigh she let out as she sat down that was so performative I half expected someone to yell cut and reset the scene for another take. She looked over at me exactly once. I didn't look back. Bruce had been very clear about courtroom etiquette. Don't engage, don't react, don't give them anything they can use. You're Switzerland, neutral and financially stable. So I kept my eyes forward, hands folded on the table in front of me, doing my best impression of someone who was completely unbothered by the entire situation. Which, honestly, wasn't that hard because at this point I was more curious than emotional. I wanted to see how this was going to play out. I wanted to watch reality crash into Sarah's version of events like a freight train hitting a car stuck on the tracks. The judge walked in, Judge Patricia Morrison, according to the nameplate on her bench, and everyone stood up in that automatic way you do in courtrooms and when the principal walks into the classroom. She was probably in her late 50s, gray hair pulled back in a professional bun, reading glasses perched on her nose, and this expression that suggested she'd seen every ridiculous thing humanity had to offer and was thoroughly unimpressed by all of it. She sat down, we sat down, and she immediately started flipping through the paperwork in front of her with the speed of someone who'd read thousands of these filings and could spot the nonsense from a mile away. "All right," Judge Morrison said without looking up. "This is a motion for temporary spousal support in the matter of Peterson versus Peterson. Mr. Chun, you're representing the petitioner. Mr. Langford, you're representing the respondent. Mr. Chun, you filed this motion. Let's hear it." Richard Chun stood up, adjusted his tie in that nervous way people do when they're about to say something they're not entirely confident about, and launched into his argument. "Your Honor, my client has been left in a position of severe financial hardship following the respondent's unilateral decision to freeze all joint accounts and cancel shared expenses without warning. She currently has no access to funds, no means of supporting herself, and is unable to maintain the standard of living she enjoyed during the marriage. We're requesting temporary support in the amount of $6,000 per month until the divorce is finalized." $6,000. I kept my face neutral, but internally I was doing math. $6,000 a month was $72,000 a year, which was more than a lot of people made at their actual jobs. For someone who allegedly couldn't afford groceries and had no means of supporting herself, that seemed like a pretty specific and aggressive number. Judge Morrison looked up from her papers, peering at Richard Chun over her reading glasses in a way that immediately made him look like he regretted every choice that had led him to this moment. "Mr. Chun, it says here that the respondent has continued to provide for basic necessities including food and utilities. Is that accurate?" "Well, Your Honor, there was one grocery delivery, but..." "Two," Bruce said calmly, not even standing up. "Two grocery deliveries, Your Honor, totaling approximately $400 in organic produce, protein, and essentials, both delivered directly to the petitioner's residence with photographic confirmation." Judge Morrison made a note on her papers. "All right, 2 grocery deliveries. What else, Mr. Chun?" Richard Chun shuffled through his papers, and I could see him trying to find solid ground to stand on. "Your Honor, my client has no access to the joint credit cards, no ability to make purchases, and no means of..." "Because she requested all communication go through attorneys," Bruce interjected, still sitting down like he was commenting on the weather. "As evidenced by the text message sent to my client on the morning of November 13th at 8:12 a.m., which I've included in our response filing. The exact wording was, 'I want a divorce. All communication through my lawyer.'" My client complied with her request. I watched Judge Morrison's face carefully, and I swear I saw the tiniest hint of a smile threaten to break through her professional exterior. She picked up another document from her stack, read it for about 10 seconds, and then looked directly at Richard Chun. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly. Your client sent a text message demanding a divorce and insisting on communication only through legal counsel. The respondent complied with that request and protected marital assets pending the divorce proceedings. And now your client is upset that the respondent followed her instructions." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Richard Chun opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and finally managed to say, "Your Honor, my client was in emotional distress when she sent that message. She didn't intend for. What she intended is irrelevant to what she communicated, Mr. Chun." Judge Morrison set down her papers and looked at Sarah directly. "Mrs. Peterson, did you or did you not send a text message to your husband requesting a divorce and demanding all communication go through attorneys?" Sarah stood up slowly, removing her oversized sunglasses in what I'm sure she thought was a dramatic reveal of her tear-stained face. Except her makeup was perfect, and there was no evidence she'd been crying at all. "Yes, Your Honor, but I was emotional. I didn't mean..." "I'm going to stop you right there," Judge Morrison said, holding up one hand. "Intent and emotional state don't change the content of written communication. You sent explicit instructions. Your husband followed them. That's not financial abuse. That's compliance." She looked back down at the papers in front of her, flipped through a few more pages, and I could practically see her piecing together the entire timeline in her head. "Mr. Langford, What is your client proposing in terms of temporary support? Bruce stood up for the first time, and he moved like a man who'd been waiting for this exact moment. Your Honor, given that my client has continued to provide for all basic necessities and that the petitioner has access to her own income, she works part-time as a yoga instructor, we believe temporary support should be minimal. We're proposing $1,500 per month, which is more than sufficient to cover any gaps in her budget while the divorce proceeds. 1,500? Richard Chin sputtered. Your Honor, that's completely inadequate for. It's $1,500 more than she'd have if she'd actually been cut off, Mr. Chun, Judge Morrison said dryly. Which, according to the evidence presented, she hasn't been. She made another note, closed the folder in front of her, and delivered what was probably the most satisfying 10 seconds of my entire life. Motion for $6,000 per month in temporary support is denied. Temporary support is granted at $1,500 per month, effective immediately. Both parties will maintain the status quo regarding marital assets until the final divorce decree. Next case. And just like that, it was over. The gavel came down. Actually came down, just like in the movies. And Judge Morrison moved on to the next filing on her docket like she hadn't just completely demolished Sarah's entire strategy. I sat there for a second, processing what had just happened, and then looked over at Bruce. He was calmly gathering his papers, organizing them back into their color-coded folders, and I swear I saw his eye twitch from holding in laughter. That was surgical, he whispered as we stood up to leave. Clean cut, I agreed, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from grinning like an idiot in the middle of a courtroom. We walked out into the hallway, and I could hear Sarah's voice behind us, rising in pitch as she said something to Richard Chun that I couldn't quite make out, but definitely involved the words unfair and how could you. Bruce and I kept walking, not looking back, not engaging, just moving forward like we had somewhere important to be, which we did lunch. Bruce had promised that if the hearing went well, he'd take me to this steakhouse downtown that he swore had the best ribeye in the city. She looked like she was auditioning for a role in a Lifetime movie. I said once we were safely in the elevator, away from the courtroom and anyone who might report back to Sarah's camp. The sunglasses indoors were a bold choice, Bruce said, and now he was actually laughing. I've seen a lot of courtroom theatrics in my career, Mark, but that was top 10, maybe top 5. Did you see the judge's face when she asked if Sarah had sent the text message? Oh, I saw it. Judge Morrison doesn't suffer fools gladly, and your wife just tried to argue that her own written communication shouldn't count because she had feelings. Bruce shook his head, still smiling. That judge has probably presided over hundreds of divorce cases. She's heard every excuse in the book. I was emotional, ranks pretty low on the sympathy scale. We got in Bruce's car, a Mercedes that definitely reflected his hourly rate, and drove to the steakhouse. The whole way there, I kept replaying the hearing in my head. Sarah's dramatic entrance. Richard Chin's increasingly desperate arguments. Judge Morrison's completely unimpressed expressions. The moment when she'd said, "Motion denied," and Sarah's face had crumpled like a paper bag. It shouldn't have felt good. I shouldn't have taken satisfaction in watching my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, get shut down in a courtroom. But I did. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because for once, the truth had actually mattered more than the performance. At the steakhouse, Bruce ordered wine, and we toasted to strategic victories and reasonable judges. The steak was as good as he'd promised, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like maybe I wasn't just surviving this divorce. I was actually navigating it successfully. With my lawyer, my documentation, and my apparently boring but effective approach to conflict resolution. What happens now? I asked between bites of perfectly cooked meat that probably cost more than that grocery delivery I'd sent Sarah. Now we move forward with the actual divorce proceedings. Asset division, final support calculations, all the fun paperwork. Bruce cut his own steak, took a bite, and nodded approvingly at his lunch choice. But after today, I don't think they're going to fight us on much. Richard Chun knows his client lied to him about the groceries. The judge knows his client tried to weaponize communication preferences. They're not operating from a position of strength anymore. So basically we won. We won the first battle, Bruce corrected. The war isn't over yet. But yeah, today was a pretty decisive victory. I finished my steak, declined dessert because I wasn't trying to fall into a food coma before going back to work, and paid for lunch because Bruce had just saved me about $54,000 in annual support payments. When we left the restaurant and headed back toward downtown, I felt lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying something heavy and had finally set it down. The divorce wasn't over, but the hardest part, the part where Sarah tried to rewrite history and paint me as the villain, had just been shut down by a judge who'd seen through the performance in approximately 3 minutes. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "How'd court go?" I typed back. "Motion denied. Support capped at $1,500. Currently eating expensive steak with my lawyer. Legend. Told you Bruce was worth it." Yeah, he really was. After court, Lauren called again. Except this time her voice had that fake sweetness people use when they've realized they backed the wrong horse and need to save face. "Mark, maybe we all overreacted a bit. You didn't have to be so cold about everything, though." I wasn't cold, Lauren. I was room temperature, perfect for logic. I could practically hear her teeth grinding through the phone. She mumbled something about family and moved on, probably to call Sarah and report that I was still being difficult by having boundaries. Meanwhile, Sarah had taken to social media like a moth to a flame. Vague quotes appeared on her Instagram. "Some people only show love when they lose you." Posted at 11 p.m. with a black and white filter and a candle emoji, because nothing says "I'm deep and wounded" like stealing quotes from Pinterest and pretending they're profound personal revelations. I posted nothing. I was too busy enjoying my newfound freedom without someone monitoring my phone and asking, "Who's texting you at 10 p.m.?" Like I was running a classified operation instead of getting notifications from my fantasy football league. Even my coworkers noticed the change. Jim from the office stopped by my desk one afternoon and said, "Man, you look happier." Like, genuinely happier. "Yeah," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. Turns out silence is cheaper than therapy and way more effective. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Assets split 60/40ths in my favor because apparently keeping receipts and not lying to your lawyer pays dividends. I kept the house, the car, and my sanity. Sarah got her new apartment and an overdraft notification that probably made her reconsider some life choices. I redecorated immediately, took down all the photos of us looking fake happy at various beach vacations where we'd argued about restaurant choices, painted the bedroom a color that wasn't soothing sage or whatever trendy nonsense Sarah had insisted on. I turned it into something brighter, cleaner, mine. Then I did something completely unexpected. I adopted a cat. A big orange tabby from the shelter who I named Sir Meows-a-Lot, because if you're going to have a cat, you might as well commit to the bit. He provided less drama than my ex-wife, but the same judgmental stare, which was oddly comforting. I started jogging again, cooking actual meals again, living again. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. I was eating them. Scrambled, with cheese, on Sunday mornings while Sir Meows-a-Lot judged my technique from the counter. Life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. And honestly, I'd take peaceful over perfect any day. 6 months later, I got an email from Bruce that started with, "You're going to enjoy this," and included a forwarded message that I had to read 3 times to fully appreciate. It was from Richard Chun to Bruce, marked, "Off the record, professional courtesy." The email was short but absolutely golden. "Bruce, off the record, my client recently admitted that she didn't think your client would actually detach. She expected begging, pleading, maybe some grand gesture to win her back. The divorce text was meant to be a wake-up call, not an actual divorce. She's now dealing with the reality that he took her at her word and moved on completely. Thought you should know. Also, excellent work on the documentation. I've never seen someone so prepared for a divorce they didn't initiate." Richard. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, coffee halfway to my mouth, processing what I'd just read. She didn't think I'd actually detach. The divorce text was a test. A power play. One of those manipulative relationship moves where someone threatens something extreme, hoping the other person will panic and suddenly transform into whatever idealized version they'd been demanding. Except I hadn't panicked. I'd just said, understood, and started making strategic decisions like a functional adult. Bruce's response to me was even better. "Begging? From you? Please. The only thing you've begged for lately was a stronger Wi-Fi signal during that Teams meeting last month." He wasn't wrong. I'd had exactly one technical meltdown in the past 6 months, and it involved my router having an existential crisis, not my marriage ending. I replied to Bruce. Tell him I appreciate the feedback. 5 stars. Would divorce again. Actually, no. Once was plenty, but you get the idea. Bruce sent back a laughing emoji, which was the most unprofessional thing I'd ever seen him do and somehow made the whole thing even better. We'd become friends over the course of this divorce. The kind of friendship that forms when someone helps you navigate the worst experience of your life with humor and competence and enough documentation to build a legal fortress. I forwarded the email chain to Mike with the message, "You were right about Bruce. Best decision I made besides saying understood." Mike replied immediately. "She thought you'd BG? Man, she really didn't know you at all. Want to grab drinks this weekend and celebrate your excellent life choices?" I told him yes, closed my laptop, and went to feed Sir Meows-a-Lot, who was staring at me with that expression that either meant, "I'm hungry," or "I'm judging your life choices," or possibly both simultaneously. The cat had become an excellent listener, mostly because he couldn't talk back and offer unsolicited advice. People still ask me about the divorce. Not in that nosy, gossipy way where they're fishing for drama to share at book club or happy hour. More in that genuinely curious way where they're trying to understand how someone goes from divorce texted at 8:12 a.m. to actually, legitimately happy 6 months later. The question usually comes in some variation of, do you miss her? Or do you ever think about getting back together? Or my personal favorite, don't you feel bad about how it all went down? My answer is always the same, and I've perfected the delivery to the point where I don't even have to think about it anymore. Sure, I miss her, like I miss dial-up internet. The comparison is perfect because it's true on multiple levels. Do I technically remember dial-up internet? Yes. Was it part of my life at one point? Absolutely. Would I ever, under any circumstances, want to go back to that screeching modem sound and waiting 17 minutes for a single image to load? Absolutely not. That's exactly how I feel about my marriage. It existed. It was fine for a while, or at least I thought it was fine. But now that I've experienced the high-speed connection of living alone with my cat and my blue walls and zero drama, there's no universe in which I'd downgrade back to that old system. The truth is, Sarah wanted to make it legal, so I made it logistical. She wanted the divorce to be this big emotional event where I'd fight for her or beg her to reconsider or prove that I loved her enough to transform into whatever fantasy version of a husband she'd created in her head. Instead, I gave her exactly what she asked for, a divorce. Clean, efficient, documented, and final. She wanted control of the narrative, wanted to be the one calling the shots and making the decisions. I gave her silence. The most powerful kind of control is the kind you don't fight for. You just step back and let someone else struggle with the consequences of their own choices. She wanted a reaction, tears, anger, some kind of emotional display she could point to and say, "See, this is why we're getting divorced. He's so dramatic." Or, "He doesn't even care. He's so cold." I gave her receipts instead. Bank statements, grocery delivery confirmations, text message screenshots with timestamps. Every single piece of documentation that proved I'd done exactly what she'd asked, exactly when she'd asked for it, with no deviation and no drama. You can't argue with receipts. You can try, but you'll just end up looking ridiculous, which is exactly what happened in that courtroom when Judge Morrison looked at Sarah over those reading glasses and essentially said, "You asked for this. You got this. Motion denied." The thing about divorce, or any major life change, really, is that people expect you to be broken by it. They expect the crying and the late-night phone calls and the social media posts about healing and growth and finding yourself. They expect you to download dating apps and start going to therapy and join a gym and do all the things that signal you're working on yourself in the aftermath of relationship failure. And maybe some people need that. Maybe some people actually are broken by divorce and need time and space and professional help to put themselves back together. But I wasn't broken. I was just done. There's a difference. Broken implies something that was whole and functional got damaged. Done implies you finished something that had run its course and you're ready to move on to the next thing. I didn't need to heal from my marriage. I just needed to close that chapter and start writing a new one, which is exactly what I did. New paint colors, new furniture, new cat, new routines, new appreciation for the simple pleasure of eating pizza from the box without commentary about refined carbohydrates or the importance of balanced meals. Now when I walk out of a room, I turn off the lights. Not because I'm bitter or making some passive-aggressive statement about our failed relationship. I turn off the lights because it's cheaper on the electric bill, and it's the responsible thing to do, and also because it's beautifully symbolic in a way that makes me smile every single time. I'm not leaving the lights on for someone who's not coming back. I'm not wasting energy on empty spaces. I'm just moving through my house, my actual house that's actually mine, and managing it like a functional adult who understands basic home economics. Because when you're truly done, and I mean actually done, not the dramatic, "I'm so done," that people say when they're still very much emotionally invested. You don't argue. You don't cry. You don't post vague quotes on social media about strength and betrayal and becoming the person you were meant to be. You don't need to convince anyone of anything or prove that you're fine or demonstrate that you've moved on. You just exist in your new reality with your cat and your comfortable couch and your freedom to watch whatever you want on TV without negotiation. You smile when you remember the absurdity of it all, the grocery wars, the courtroom theatrics, the panicked voicemail from a lawyer who realized his client had lied to him about organic produce. You take deep breaths that aren't weighed down by anxiety or tension or the constant feeling that you're somehow doing everything slightly wrong. You let the lawyers do the talking because that's literally what you're paying them for, and they're much better at it than you'd ever be. And you move forward, not in some grand, transformative way that'll become an inspirational story people share at divorce support groups. Just forward. One day at a time, one room at a time, one light switch at a time. Done, dusted, and delightfully petty in all the small ways that make you smile. Sir Meows a lot meowed from his spot on the couch, probably wondering why I was standing in the kitchen staring into space instead of feeding him dinner. I turned off the kitchen light, walked into the living room, and sat down next to my judgmental orange cat who'd seen me through the weirdest 6 months of my life without offering a single piece of unsolicited advice. "You hungry, buddy?" I asked. He stared at me with those unblinking cat eyes that somehow conveyed both supreme indifference and mild approval. Yeah, life was good. My wife, who just graduated from law school I paid for, publicly embarrassed me at her graduation party just because I asked to take a picture with her. She smirked and said, "I don't take pictures with our lives." A few minutes later, I placed a call to the law board committee, and the whole party came to a standstill. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm some kind of victim, all right? My name's Marcus Hale, I'm 38 years old, and apparently my biggest crime in this life is believing that love and potential could coexist in the same zip code. Spoiler alert, they can't, and I've got the emotional scars and bank statements to prove it. When I met Claire Richardson 5 years ago, she was what you'd call financially challenged, which is just a fancy way of saying broke as hell. We're talking second-year law student living in a studio apartment that was literally smaller than most people's walk-in closets, surviving on a steady diet of instant ramen, questionable leftovers, and the kind of hope that only comes from someone who's never actually paid their own bills. You know the type. Big dreams, empty wallet, and a smile that could convince you to mortgage your future for their present. And me? Well, I was the guy everyone back home called boring but reliable. You know what that means in real-life translation? It means I was the sucker with a stable income and a savior complex the size of Texas. While all my buddies were out there living their best lives, traveling, partying, actually enjoying their 20s and early 30s, I was grinding like my life depended on it. And honestly, someone's life did depend on it, just not mine. I worked 3 jobs back then, and I'm not exaggerating for dramatic effect here. Monday through Friday, I was pulling double duty as an IT consultant for some corporate hellhole where everyone used synergy, unironically, and thought casual Friday meant wearing jeans with your suit jacket. Nights and weekends? I was slinging drinks at this upscale cocktail bar downtown, listening to finance bros brag about their crypto portfolios while their dates pretended to be impressed. And then, just to really spice things up, I drove for Uber whenever I had a spare 4 hours, basically becoming a part-time therapist for drunk people and a mobile philosophical discussion leader for insomniacs who wanted to debate whether hot dogs were sandwiches at 2 in the morning. You might be wondering why anyone would voluntarily sign up for this kind of punishment. Well, here's the thing. I thought we were building something together. I genuinely believed that Claire and I were a team, that every tuition payment I made, every textbook I bought, Every late-night study session I supported by bringing her coffee and encouragement was an investment in our future. Plural. Our future. 4 or 5 solid years. I was her personal ATM, life coach, and cheerleading squad all rolled into one exhausted package. I paid her tuition every semester. And let me tell you, law school isn't cheap. We're talking the kind of money that makes you wonder if they're printing the diplomas on actual gold leaf. I bought her books, those massive, unnecessary legal textbooks that cost more than my first car and somehow weigh approximately as much as a baby elephant. I even ironed her courtroom blazers. People, do you know how many blazers a law student needs? Too many. The answer is too many. Every time I felt that little voice in the back of my head asking if maybe, just maybe, I was being taken advantage of, Claire would look at me with those eyes and say something like, "Babe, we'll celebrate when I pass the bar. All of this is going to be worth it. You'll see. We're going to make it together." And like an idiot, a well-intentioned, hopelessly romantic idiot, I believed her. I believed every word. I thought I was building a partnership, a marriage, a life with someone who would eventually stand beside me as an equal. I pictured us 10 years down the line, sitting on our porch, laughing about the ramen days and the struggle and how we made it through together. I imagined her successful law career balanced perfectly with my tech business. Both of us finally comfortable, finally able to breathe without checking our bank accounts every 5 minutes. Turns out, I wasn't the partner in this equation. I was the investor. And not even the kind of investor who gets their name on the building or equity in the company. Nah, I was more like the silent partner who funds everything, takes all the risk, and gets absolutely nothing when the business goes public. I was the venture capitalist who got cut out of the deal right before the IPO. The angel investor who learned that angel was just code for sucker with cash. Claire used to tell her law school friends that she was self-made, which is technically true if you completely ignore the definition of self and made. She'd post those inspirational quotes on Instagram about strong women who did it all on their own, complete with candid study photos that I took, in the apartment that I paid for, using the laptop that I bought. The cognitive dissonance was truly impressive. But here's what really gets me. I wasn't even asking for credit. I didn't need a parade or a medal or my name in her graduation program. I just wanted to be seen. I wanted to be acknowledged as something more than the boring, reliable guy who kept the lights on while she chased her dreams. I wanted her to look at me the way she looked at her future career, with excitement, with possibility, with the kind of respect you give to things that actually matter. She used to say, "We'll celebrate when I pass the bar, babe." And you know what? She was right. We did celebrate. Well, she celebrated. I just showed up, delivered some flowers, and learned what the view looks like from rock bottom. Because here's the punchline I didn't see coming. I didn't realize I'd be the joke at the celebration. I thought I was the supporting character who'd finally get their moment in the spotlight, maybe a thank you speech or at least a genuine smile across a crowded room. Instead, I became the punchline in a story about a woman who made it despite her circumstances. And those circumstances had a name, a face, and 3 jobs that left him too tired to notice he was being written out of the narrative in real time. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way she stopped asking about my day. The way we slowly became I in all her sentences. The way she'd correct people who assumed I was a lawyer too. Always making sure everyone knew I was just in tech, with that little dismissive laugh that made it sound like I spent my days playing video games instead of building actual software that actual companies actually used. But back then I was too busy being the dependable one, the reliable one, the boring one who showed up and did the work and loved someone who had already moved on without bothering to mention it. So yeah, that's me. Marcus Hale, 38 years old, believer in potential, investor in dreams, and the guy who learned the hard way that love and gratitude don't always come as a package deal. Some lessons cost you money. This one cost me 5 years and every ounce of self-respect I'd managed to save up. But don't worry, the story gets better. Or worse, depending on whose side you're on. And something tells me you're not going to be on Claire's side for much longer. So here's where things get really fun. And by fun, I mean soul-crushingly humiliating in a way that'll probably require years of therapy to fully unpack. Claire's graduation party was scheduled for a Saturday night at this ridiculously fancy rooftop lounge downtown called The Elevation. Yeah, that was actually the name. The Elevation. Because nothing says, "I've made it," quite like a pretentious venue name that sounds like a motivational seminar. This place was the kind of spot where everything costs 3 times what it should and comes in portions small enough to fit on a coaster. We're talking string lights everywhere that probably cost more than my monthly rent, overpriced sushi that had been sitting under heat lamps just long enough to question its freshness, and a jazz band that seemed to think every musical mistake they made was actually an intentional artistic choice. You know the type. They'd hit a wrong note and then nod at each other like, yes, that dissonance really captures the existential dread of modern capitalism. The place was packed with Claire's law school crowd. And let me tell you, if you've never been surrounded by 100 newly minted lawyers who are all convinced they're the next Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you haven't truly experienced the full spectrum of human insufferability. Everyone was dressed to the nines, holding champagne flutes like they were props in a movie about successful people, talking way too loud about justice and ethics and how to bill clients for a 6-minute phone call without blinking. The energy in that room was equal parts celebration and Shark Tank, like everyone was simultaneously congratulating each other and sizing up the competition. I showed up wearing my best navy blazer, and okay, full disclosure, it was the same one from our wedding 4 years ago, but who's really counting? It still fit, it was still in decent shape, and honestly, when you've spent the last 5 years funneling every spare dollar into someone else's education, you don't exactly have a lot left over for updating your wardrobe. I'd even gotten it dry cleaned for the occasion, which felt like a big deal at the time. I wanted to look good. I wanted to look like I belonged there, standing next to my successful wife at her moment of triumph. In my hands, I carried a bouquet of stargazer lilies, Claire's favorite flowers, or at least they used to be back when she still told me personal things about herself. I'd special ordered them from this boutique florist across town, the kind of place where they wrap everything in that fancy paper and tie it with silk ribbons. Cost me $80, which probably sounds ridiculous for flowers that'll be dead in a week, but I wanted the gesture to be perfect. I wanted her to see me walk in with those lilies and remember that I knew her, that I paid attention, that I cared about the details. You'd think that kind of effort would earn me at least a smile, right? Maybe a kiss on the cheek? Thank you for coming, babe. Hell, at this point I would have settled for basic eye contact and a nod of acknowledgement. Wrong. So incredibly, painfully wrong. When I finally spotted Claire across the room, she was holding court at this big center table, surrounded by her law school friends like she was some kind of legal royalty. And maybe she was, in their world. She looked amazing, I'll give her that, wearing this gorgeous black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my car payment, hair done up in some complicated style that required a professional, makeup perfect. She was glowing with that particular kind of confidence that comes from finally achieving something you've worked your ass off for. Except, she didn't work her ass off alone, but apparently we were conveniently forgetting that part. Her crew was laughing at something she'd said, probably some inside joke about their contracts professor or a case study I wouldn't understand because I was just the IT guy who paid the bills. They all had that same energy, young, ambitious, ready to take on the world and bill it at $300 an hour. Every single one of them looked like they'd stepped out of a legal drama TV show, all sharp angles and sharper ambitions. I took a deep breath, straightened my blazer. The wedding blazer, the only good blazer I owned, and walked over with my bouquet of expensive lilies, feeling simultaneously proud of her and nervous about my place in this new world she'd entered. The closer I got, the more I could hear their conversation. Something about a firm downtown that was recruiting, starting salaries in the 6 figures, partnership tracks, corner offices. All the things that mattered to them. All the things that apparently mattered to Claire now. Hey, honey, I said, trying to sound casual and confident as I approached the table. My voice came out a little too loud, trying to be heard over the jazz band's enthusiastic butchering of Take 5. Can we take a picture together? You look amazing. It was such a simple request. Such a normal, reasonable thing to ask at your wife's graduation party. A picture. Evidence that we'd been there together, that this achievement belonged to both of us in some small way. Maybe something to post on social media, to show my mom, to frame on our wall alongside all the other milestone moments. Claire turned to look at me, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Annoyance, maybe? Embarrassment? It was gone so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. Then she smirked, not smiled, smirked. in this way that made my stomach drop before my brain even processed what was about to happen. And then she said it, loud enough for the whole table to hear, loud enough that the conversations around us started to fade, loud enough that I'll probably hear it echoing in my nightmares for the rest of my natural life. I don't take pictures with low lives. The words just hung there in the air between us, like smoke from a gun that had just gone off. For a moment, time did that thing it does in movies where everything slows down and gets really quiet. The jazz band hit what I'm pretty sure was an actual wrong note this time, not an artistic one. The conversations at nearby tables stuttered and stopped. Someone, I think it was her friend Tara, the one who always looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her designer's shoe, literally choked on a piece of shrimp tempura, coughing into her napkin while her eyes went wide. I just stood there, holding my $80 bouquet of stargazer lilies, wearing my wedding blazer, blinking like someone had just slapped me across the face with a law textbook. Did my wife, the woman I'd sacrificed everything for, the woman whose entire career I'd funded, just call me a lowlife? In front of all her friends? At her graduation party? The party I'd probably indirectly paid for through 5 years of tuition payments? Yeah, she did. The table had gone completely silent now. Everyone was looking at me, then at Claire, then back at me, like they were watching a tennis match but couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. A guy in a pinstripe suit, probably some trust fund kid who'd never worked a real job in his life, whispered "oof" under his breath. Someone else cleared their throat awkwardly. Tara had stopped choking and was now staring at her champagne glass like it held the secrets of the universe. And Claire? Claire just sat there with that smirk on her face, surrounded by her new friends in her new world, looking at me like I was an inconvenience she couldn't wait to get rid of. Like I was some random dude who'd wandered in off the street instead of the husband who'd made this entire moment possible. That's when I realized something important, something fundamental, something that would change everything that came next. I wasn't her partner. I wasn't even her past. I was her embarrassment, her secret shame, the part of her origin story she wanted to edit out before anyone important read it. Well, that was about to change. You know that moment in a sitcom where someone says something absolutely devastating and there's this uncomfortable pause before the laugh track kicks in? Yeah, this was that moment, except there was no laugh track, no commercial break to give everyone time to process, and absolutely no script telling me what my next line should be. This was real life, happening in real time, and I was standing there like an idiot with flowers that suddenly felt like they weighed about 700 pounds. The moment just hung there in the air between us, thick and awkward, like a bad Wi-Fi signal that keeps cutting out right when you're trying to stream something important. Everyone at that table was frozen, mid-sip, mid-bite, mid-breath. You could literally see people trying to figure out what the appropriate reaction was. Do we laugh? Do we pretend we didn't hear it? Do we check our phones and act like we're suddenly very interested in an urgent email? The social anxiety in the air was so thick you could have cut it with one of those overpriced sushi knives. Tara, Claire's best friend, the one who'd been choking on shrimp tempura like karma was trying to send her a message, let out this weird little giggle into her champagne glass. You know the kind, that nervous laugh people do when they're not sure if something's supposed to be funny but they want to be on the winning team anyway? It came out all bubbly and uncertain, like even she wasn't committed to it. The dude in the pinstripe suit, Mr. Oof, himself, leaned over to the guy next to him and whispered something while trying really hard not to look at me. Even the jazz band, God bless them, hit another legitimately wrong note, like the universe itself was cringing so hard it affected their ability to play instruments. I just stood there for what felt like 17 years, but was probably only about 5 seconds, still holding those damn lilies, still wearing my wedding blazer, still trying to process the fact that my wife had just called me a lowlife in front of her entire graduating class. My brain was doing that thing where it runs through about 50 different response options in rapid succession. Walk away, cry, throw the flowers, make a scene, pretend I didn't hear it, laugh it off, set something on fire, and then something weird happened, something I didn't expect. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Oh hell no, nothing about this was funny. Not because I was okay with what just happened, because I definitely wasn't. I smiled because when life hands you humiliation on a silver platter at a rooftop party full of lawyers who think they're hot shit, you might as well order dessert and make everyone else uncomfortable too. When you're already at rock bottom, you've got nothing left to lose, and that's a surprisingly liberating feeling. So I smiled. A real smile. The kind of smile that probably looked a little unhinged if I'm being honest, like I'd just figured out the punchline to a joke that nobody else had heard yet. Lowlife, I said, nodding slowly like I was really considering the accusation, rolling it around in my head to see if it fit. My voice came out surprisingly steady, surprisingly calm, which seemed to throw Claire off because her smirk faltered just a little bit. You're right, sweetheart. You're absolutely right. I mean, I only paid for your degree, your rent, your car, your bar prep course, and those emotional therapy sessions you needed after finals when you had that breakdown about contracts too. So yeah, technically, I'm pretty broke now. Guilty as charged. The table went dead silent. Like, morgue silent. Library silent. Holding your breath underwater silent. Someone's fork clattered against their plate, and it sounded like a gunshot in the sudden quiet. Tara's giggle died in her throat, so fast I'm pretty sure she choked on it a little. Pinstripe suit guy's eyes went wide, and he suddenly found his sushi extremely interesting, staring at it like it might tell him how to escape this situation. A few people at the surrounding tables, people who'd been eavesdropping because let's be real, everyone was eavesdropping, let out these nervous laughs. The awkward kind. The kind where you're not sure if you're laughing at the joke or at the absolute carnage unfolding in front of you. It was the social equivalent of watching a car crash in slow motion. You know you shouldn't look, but you absolutely cannot look away. Claire's face did this interesting thing where it went from smug to surprised to angry in about 2 seconds flat. Her jaw tightened, and I could see her doing that thing she always did when she was pissed. This little muscle in her cheek would twitch. She set down her champagne glass with just a little too much force, and some of it sloshed over the rim onto the white tablecloth. "Marcus," she said, and her voice had that warning tone that I'd heard 1,000 times before. That tone that said I was about to cross a line, that I needed to back down, that I was embarrassing her. "Don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. That's rich. That's absolutely beautiful. She calls me a lowlife in front of 50 people, humiliates me at her graduation party that I essentially funded, and I'm the one making a scene?" The audacity was truly impressive. If they gave out degrees in gaslighting, Claire would have graduated summa cum laude. I laughed. I actually laughed, and it came out sounding maybe a little bit crazy, but you know what? I'd earned a little bit of crazy. I'd paid for it, literally, over 5 years of sacrifice. "Make a scene," I repeated, still smiling that smile that probably looked like it belonged on someone who'd just snapped. "Honey, I'm not making a scene. I am the scene. I'm the whole damn production. I'm the opening act, the main event, and the encore. Hell, I sold the tickets and ran the concession stand." A couple of people actually snorted into their drinks at that one. I saw a guy at the next table over. Some older dude who was probably a professor, crack a smile and try to hide it behind his hand. Even one of the jazz band members, the guy on the saxophone, looked over and raised his eyebrows like he was impressed. Claire stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor with this horrible screeching sound that made everyone wince. She grabbed my arm, not gently, and tried to pull me away from the table, away from her friends, away from the audience she'd just performed for. "Can we talk?" she hissed through clenched teeth, still trying to smile for her friends like everything was fine. Like this was just a little misunderstanding between a happy couple. Privately, I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her face, then at all the people watching us. Every single person at that table was pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. Tara had her phone out now, probably texting the group chat. Pinstripe Suit was whispering to his buddy again. A girl I didn't recognize had her mouth literally hanging open. "Sure," I said pleasantly. "Let's talk. But first, let me get this straight. You don't want to take a picture with me because I'm a lowlife, but you do want to talk to me privately? Interesting choice. Very lawyer of you. Only acknowledge the help when nobody's watching, right?" Her grip on my arm tightened, and I could see her doing that thing where she was counting to 10 in her head, trying not to lose her cool in front of everyone who mattered to her new career. Because that's what this was really about, wasn't it? Image. Optics. Making sure everyone at this party saw her as the self-made success story, not the woman whose husband worked 3 jobs to put her through school. "You're being ridiculous," she said quietly, but loud enough that the people closest to us could still hear. "You're embarrassing yourself." And that's when it hit me. The real punchline. The thing that made all of this suddenly crystal clear. She genuinely believed that. She actually, honestly thought that I was the one who should be embarrassed, that calling out her behavior, naming the reality of our situation, pointing out the 5 years of sacrifice I'd made, that was somehow more shameful than what she'd just done. The cognitive dissonance was absolutely stunning. It was like watching someone set a house on fire and then blame the smoke alarm for making too much noise. I gently pulled my arm out of her grip and took a step back. The lilies were still in my other hand, and I looked at them for a second. $80, special ordered, her favorite flowers. What a waste. You know what? I said, and my voice came out tired suddenly. Not angry, not hurt, just exhausted. You're right. I am making a scene, and it's been a long time coming. I set the flowers down on her table, right in the middle of all the champagne glasses and expensive sushi. They looked ridiculous there, too pretty for the moment, too sincere for the company. Enjoy your party, I said. Enjoy your new life. Enjoy everything you worked so hard for. The sarcasm in that last sentence could have cut glass. And then I did something I should have done a long time ago. I turned around and walked toward the bar, leaving her standing there with her mouth open and her friends suddenly very interested in their phones. As I walked away from that table, from Claire, from her smirking friends, from the whole toxic circus, the memories started flooding back. You know how they say your life flashes before your eyes when you're dying? Well, apparently the same thing happens when your marriage dies, except it's slower and way more painful, and there's a jazz band providing an unnecessarily dramatic soundtrack. I could see it all now, crystal clear, like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I'd been stumbling through in the dark for 5 years. Every red flag I'd ignored, every warning sign I'd convinced myself was just a misunderstanding, every moment where my gut told me something was off, and I'd told my gut to shut up, because love conquers all, right? Wrong. So spectacularly, devastatingly wrong. I remembered the first time one of my buddies tried to warn me. It was about 6 months after Claire and I had gotten serious, maybe a year before we got married. My friend Jake and I were grabbing beers at our usual spot, this dive bar near my apartment that served wings so good they could make you forget your problems for at least 20 minutes. I'd been going on and on about Claire, how smart she was, how driven, how she was going to be this amazing lawyer someday, and we were going to have this incredible life together. Jake had listened patiently, nodding and making the appropriate supportive sounds, until he finally put his beer down and looked at me with this expression that I now recognize as concern mixed with my friend is about to make a huge mistake, and I have to at least try to stop him. Bro, he'd said, choosing his words carefully. I'm happy you're happy. Really I am. But doesn't it bother you that you're paying for everything? Like everything? Her rent, her tuition, her groceries, her car insurance. I mean, when does she start contributing? I'd bristled immediately, gotten defensive the way you do when someone points out a truth you're not ready to hear. She's in law school, man. She's focused on studying. She doesn't have time for a job. This is temporary. Once she graduates, once she passes the bar, things will balance out. We're investing in our future. Jake had given me this look, this sad, knowing look that said he'd heard this story before and knew exactly how it ended. Your future, or her future? Same thing, I'd said confidently, like I actually believed it. We're a team. He'd opened his mouth to say something else, then closed it, shaken his head. Taken another drink. All right, man. I hope you're right. I really do. But he wasn't the only one. Oh no. I had a whole chorus of people trying to tell me the truth that I was too stubborn, or too in love, or too stupid to see. My sister Rachel had pulled me aside at Thanksgiving during Claire's second year of law school. We'd been in the kitchen, me washing dishes while everyone else watched football in the living room. And Rachel had been drying plates with this concerned expression that made her look way too much like our mom. Marcus, she'd said quietly, glancing toward the living room where Claire was chatting with our cousins. Can I ask you something? And please don't get mad. Sure, I'd said, scrubbing at a particularly stubborn piece of cranberry sauce. Are you happy? Like really happy? The question had caught me off guard. Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask that? Rachel had set down the plate she was drying and turned to face me directly. Because you look exhausted. Because you're working yourself to death. Because every time we talk, you're stressed about money or tired from pulling double shifts. And meanwhile, Claire is. I don't know. She just seems like she's living her best life while you're drowning. She's in law school, I'd said, and I realized I was using the same defensive tone I'd used with Jake. It's hard. She's under a lot of pressure. And you're not. Rachel had challenged. Marcus, you're working 3 jobs. 3. When was the last time you did something for yourself? When was the last time she did something for you? I'd thought about it, standing there with my hands in dishwater, and couldn't come up with a good answer. We're building something together, I'd finally said, knowing it sounded weak even as I said it. Rachel had sighed. Okay, but just promise me you'll think about whether she's actually building it with you, or if she's just letting you build it for her while she takes all the credit. I'd promised, but I hadn't thought about it. Not really, because thinking about it would have meant admitting that maybe, just maybe, everyone who loved me could see something I couldn't. Then there was my coworker Lisa from the IT firm, who'd been the most blunt about it. We'd been grabbing lunch one day, sitting in the break room eating sad desk salads, and I'd mentioned something about picking up an extra Uber shift that weekend to cover Claire's bar prep course fees. Lisa had put down her fork and looked at me like I'd just told her I was planning to swim with sharks while covered in bacon. Dude, stop. Stop what? Stop funding this woman's entire existence. She's using you. Like, textbook using you. You know that, right? I'd laughed it off. Actually laughed. She's not using me. We're married. That's what you do. You support each other. Except she's not supporting you, Lisa had pointed out. When was the last time she paid for anything? When was the last time she worked? When was the last time she even acknowledged everything you're doing? She says thank you. I'd protested weakly. Saying thank you and actually being grateful are 2 very different things, Lisa had said. Mark my words, the second she doesn't need you anymore, she's gone. I've seen this before. Hell, my ex-husband did the same thing to me. Used me to get through medical school and then dumped me for a nurse the month after he started his residency. Claire's not like that, I'd insisted. Lisa had just shrugged. I hope you're right. But maybe keep some screenshots of all those tuition payments, just in case. At the time, I thought she was being cynical, bitter, projecting her own failed marriage onto my perfectly fine one. Now I wished I'd listened. Now I wished I'd kept better records, taken her advice, protected myself. But the worst memory, the one that really stung as I stood there at the bar ordering my drink, was from about 6 months ago. Claire had just finished her final exams, was waiting for bar results, and I'd suggested we take a weekend trip. Nothing fancy, just a little bed and breakfast upstate, a chance to relax together and celebrate her being done with school. She'd looked at me like I'd suggested we vacation in a dumpster. I can't afford that right now, Marcus. I'll pay for it, I'd said, because of course I would. I always did. That's not the point, she'd snapped. I need to focus on networking, on making connections for jobs. I don't have time for some romantic getaway. We haven't had a real vacation in 5 years, I'd pointed out. Don't you think we've earned it? Don't you think we deserve a break? You mean I've earned it, she'd corrected. I'm the one who just finished law school. You've just been working. Just been working. Like those 3 jobs were nothing. Like every sacrifice I'd made was just background noise in her success story. I let it go. Convinced myself she was stressed, that she didn't mean it the way it sounded. Told myself that once things settled down, once she had a job and felt more secure, she'd go back to being the woman I'd fallen in love with. But here's the thing about rose-colored glasses. When you're wearing them, all the red flags just look like flags. As the laughter from that table behind me faded into the general party noise, as I leaned against the bar and waited for the bartender to notice me, I finally let myself see it all clearly. Every warning I'd ignored, every excuse I'd made for her, every time I'd chosen to believe her promises over the evidence right in front of my face. My friends had warned me, bro, she's using you. And I'd said, nah, she's just ambitious. My sister had warned me, she's not building anything with you. And I'd said, you don't understand our relationship. My coworker had warned me, the second she doesn't need you, she's gone. And I'd said, Claire's not like that. Turns out ambition looks a lot like betrayal when you're wearing a cap and gown and surrounded by people who don't know what you sacrificed to get there. Turns out, using someone and building a partnership can look identical until the person getting used finally opens their eyes. Turns out everyone else could see what I couldn't, or wouldn't. I'd studied patience while Claire studied law. 5 years of advanced coursework and biting my tongue, swallowing my pride, and convincing myself that love meant putting someone else's dreams ahead of my own happiness. And you know what? I got my PhD in it. Graduated top of my class in the school of being a doormat. The bartender finally made his way over, and I must have looked like hell because he took one look at my face and said, "Rough night?" "You could say that," I replied. My wife just called me a lowlife at her graduation party. The party I basically paid for. He winced. "Ouch. What are you drinking?" "Something strong enough to make me forget the last 5 years, but not so strong I can't enjoy what's about to happen next." He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. "Smart man. One old-fashioned, coming up." "Make it heavy on the irony," I said. So instead of doing what any normal person would do, which would be storming out, making a scene, maybe throwing a drink, definitely crying in my car, I did something that probably looked insane to anyone watching. I stayed. I ordered a drink. I leaned against that bar like I had all the time in the world and nothing better to do than enjoy the ambience of my own public humiliation. One old-fashioned, I told the bartender, and I swear to God, this came out of my mouth without even thinking, heavy on the irony. He gave me this look, half sympathy, half amusement, and started mixing the drink. I could feel eyes on me from all over the room. The story was already spreading through the party like wildfire. "That guy over there? Yeah, that's Claire's husband. She just called him a lowlife. Can you believe it? Did you hear what he said back? This is better than the drama on Suits." From my vantage point at the bar, I had a perfect view of Claire's table. She'd sat back down, and her friends had immediately swarmed her with that particular brand of fake concern that women deploy when they smell gossip. Tara was leaning in close, probably asking if she was okay, while simultaneously filing away every detail to share with the group chat later. Pinstripe suit guy had his arm around some blonde woman, both of them shooting glances in my direction and whispering. A couple of the older professors had wandered off, probably uncomfortable with the amount of personal drama unfolding at what was supposed to be a professional celebration. But Claire? Oh, Claire was in her element now. She was doing damage control, working the table like a politician after a scandal. I could see her laughing, touching people's arms, leaning in to say things that made them laugh and nod. She was spinning the narrative in real time, probably painting me as the crazy, jealous husband who couldn't handle her success. The bitter spouse who showed up to ruin her big moment. Poor Claire, stuck with such an unsupportive partner. Thank God she's finally free to thrive without dead weight holding her back. And you know what? A month ago, hell, maybe even an hour ago, that would have worked. I would have felt guilty. I would have wondered if maybe I was being unreasonable, if maybe I was letting my insecurities get the best of me, if maybe I should apologize for embarrassing her at her own party. But right now, watching her perform for her audience, I felt nothing but clarity. Crystal clear, high definition, 4K clarity. The bartender slid my drink across the bar. "On the house," he said quietly. "I heard what happened. You okay, man?" "Getting there," I said, taking a sip. It was perfect, smooth, strong, with just enough sweetness to take the edge off. "Thanks." He nodded and moved down the bar to help another customer, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my drink and the beginnings of a plan that was forming in my head like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text from my buddy Chris, who I'd mentioned the party to earlier in the week. He probably expected me to be sending him happy photos of my successful wife, maybe a selfie of us together looking like a power couple. The text read, "Heard she called you a lowlife. You okay, man?" I stared at that message for a second. Word traveled fast. Someone must have already texted him, or maybe posted about it on social media. Great. Just great. My humiliation was probably already going viral in our friend circle. I typed back, "Give me 10 minutes. Gonna redefine the word low." His response was immediate. "What are you gonna do?" I looked at that question for a long moment, my finger hovering over the keyboard. What was I going to do? Walk away? Let her win? Let her tell everyone that I was just the bitter ex-husband who couldn't handle her success? Let her rewrite our entire history, erasing 5 years of sacrifice and support so she could be the self-made success story she'd always wanted to be? No. Hell no. I didn't type anything back to Chris. Instead, I took another sip of my old-fashioned and let my mind work through the situation with the kind of cold, calculated precision I usually reserved for debugging code or solving complex IT problems. Here's the thing that nobody at that rooftop party knew. The thing that Claire had conveniently forgotten in her rush to distance herself from her low-life husband. I wasn't just some random IT guy who fixed computers and drove for Uber. That was the side hustle, the survival job, the thing I did to pay the bills while Claire chased her dreams. My actual career, the thing I'd built before I met Claire and had put on hold to support her. I owned a tech company. Small, yeah, but specialized and very, very good at what we did. We built digital compliance software, the kind of behind-the-scenes systems that nobody thinks about until they need them. Boring stuff. Databases, security protocols, verification systems. The kind of technology that major institutions relied on to keep their operations running smoothly and legally. And one of our biggest clients? The State Law Board Committee. You know, the organization responsible for licensing lawyers. The people who decided whether someone could practice law or not. The gatekeepers of the entire legal profession in this state. We'd landed that contract about 2 years ago, right around the time Claire was in her second year of law school. I'd actually told her about it, excited about the big client, about how it might mean more stable income, about how things were looking up for my company. She'd barely listened, too focused on studying for her civil procedure exam. Ironic, considering civil procedure was all about following the rules, and she was about to learn a very hard lesson about what happens when you don't. My company handled their database. We managed their applicant tracking system. We maintained their digital records. We built the software that verified financial disclosures, checked for conflicts of interest, and flagged any inconsistencies in applications. And I had access to all of it. Not illegal access. This wasn't some hacking situation. I had legitimate, authorized, administrative access as the owner of the company that maintained their systems. I could look up any applicant, review any file, check any detail. It was part of my job to ensure data integrity, to catch errors, to make sure everything was running smoothly. I pulled out my phone again and opened my email app, scrolling through until I found the folder labeled State Bar Admin. There it was, my login credentials for the administrative portal. I checked the system just last week, running a routine security audit. My fingers hovered over the screen. This was the moment. The fork in the road. I could finish my drink, walk out of this party, file for divorce, and move on with my life. Take the high road. Be the bigger person. Let karma handle Claire in its own time. Or I could take that low road. The one Claire had just accused me of being on anyway. If I was already a lowlife in her eyes, in front of all her friends and colleagues, then what exactly did I have to lose? I thought about 5 years of sacrifice. 5 years of 3 jobs. 5 years of instant ramen while she ate sushi. 5 years of ironing her blazers and proofreading her papers and listening to her complain about professors and classmates and the stress of it all. 5 years of just wait until I graduate, and we'll celebrate later, and you're so supportive, babe. 5 years of being a doormat with a credit card and a stupid, stubborn belief in potential. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Chris. Dude, whatever you're planning, just think it through first. I smiled. Good old Chris. Always the voice of reason. Always the guy who told you to sleep on it, to cool down, to not make any rash decisions you'd regret. But here's the thing about regret. I'd spent 5 years regretting things I didn't do. Regretting that I didn't stand up for myself more. Regretting that I didn't push back when Claire started treating me like an ATM instead of a partner. Regretting that I didn't listen to Jake, to Rachel, to Lisa, to everyone who tried to warn me. I was done with that kind of regret. I pulled up my contacts and scrolled down to a number I hadn't called in a while. It was labeled Board Executive Line, a direct connection to the administrative office that handled bar applications and licensing issues. I'd gotten the number when we first set up their system, told to call if there were ever any technical emergencies or data integrity concerns. Well, this was definitely a data integrity concern. I looked back over at Claire's table one more time. She was posing for photos now, smiling that brilliant smile, holding her diploma, surrounded by congratulatory people who thought they were witnessing the beginning of a great legal career. The jazz band had started playing something upbeat. I think it was Feeling Good. How appropriate. I hit the call button. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, someone picked up. State Bar Administration, this is Director Morrison. Evening, Director. I said, my voice completely calm, completely professional. This is Marcus Hale from Hale Tech Solutions. I'm calling about a discrepancy I've noticed in one of your new applicant profiles. I think we need to flag it for review. At this hour? He sounded surprised, but not annoyed. We had a good working relationship. My company had saved their asses more than once with our reliable systems. I know, I apologize for the timing, I said. But given the sensitivity of bar admissions, I thought it was better to report it immediately rather than wait until Monday. I appreciate that. What's the issue? I took a sip of my drink. The irony tasted delicious. It's regarding applicant Claire Richardson. ID number 4276B. There's a conflict of interest issue with her financial declaration. The system flagged some inconsistencies regarding undisclosed support payments during her academic term. There was a pause. I could hear keyboard clicking on the other end. I'm pulling up her file now, Morrison said. What kind of support payments? Substantial ones, I said. Tuition, housing, living expenses. All provided by a spouse, but not properly disclosed in the financial aid sections or the character and fitness portions of her application. It raises questions about financial transparency and full disclosure, which, as you know, are pretty crucial for bar admission. More keyboard clicking. A longer pause. Mr. Hale, Morrison said slowly. Are you saying there's evidence of misrepresentation on this application? I'm saying there's a discrepancy that needs investigation, I replied. That's all. I'm just the tech guy flagging what the system caught. What you do with that information is entirely up to your office. We'll need to put her admission on hold pending review, he said. This is serious. We'll have to contact her immediately. I checked my watch. How immediately are we talking? Within the hour. We take these matters very seriously. Of course, I said. That's why I called. Just doing my job, making sure everything's above board. We appreciate the vigilance, Morrison said. I'll escalate this to the review committee tonight. Happy to help, I said, and ended the call. I set my phone down on the bar and picked up my drink. The jazz band was still playing Feeling Good, and honestly, I was starting to feel pretty good myself. I stepped outside onto the rooftop terrace after making that call, needing some air and also wanting to position myself where I could watch the entrance. The night air was cool against my face, a welcome relief from the stuffy atmosphere inside, where everybody was too busy networking and social climbing to notice they were suffocating. The city lights flickered below us like they were in on the joke, like they knew something spectacular was about to go down and they had front row seats. I leaned against the railing, phone still in my hand, and let myself have a moment. Just a moment to process what I'd just done. There was no going back now. I'd pulled the trigger, made the call, set things in motion that couldn't be undone. In about 30 minutes, maybe less, someone from the state bar was going to walk through those doors and Claire's entire world was going to implode. Part of me, the part that had loved her once, that had believed in us, that had spent 5 years trying to build something, felt a twinge of guilt. Just a twinge. Like a phantom pain from something that used to be there, but wasn't anymore. The rest of me? The rest of me felt like I'd just exhaled after holding my breath for 5 years straight. My phone buzzed. Chris again. You're being really quiet, and that's making me nervous. I typed back, just enjoying the view. Party's about to get interesting. Marcus, what did you do? Nothing illegal. Nothing immoral. Just made sure the right people knew the truth. Oh shit. Yeah. I pocketed my phone and checked my watch. 23 minutes since I'd made the call. Morrison had said within the hour, but knowing how seriously the bar took integrity violations, I figured they'd move fast. Especially on a Saturday night when they could catch the person at their graduation party, surrounded by witnesses. Maximum impact, maximum accountability. The irony wasn't lost on me that Claire had studied law for 5 years and somehow missed the part about full disclosure being kind of a big deal. Through the glass doors, I could see the party continuing inside. The jazz band had moved on from Feeling Good. Shame, I was really vibing with that one. And we're now playing something smooth and forgettable. Claire was still holding court at her table, probably 3 glasses of champagne deep by now, laughing with her law school friends about whatever lawyers in training laugh about. Billable hours? Loopholes? The crushing weight of student debt they didn't actually have to pay themselves? Tara was practically glued to her side, playing the role of best friend and social media manager, taking photos for Instagram that would probably be captioned something like, "She did it." So proud of this queen. Hashtag law school grad, hashtag future esquire, hashtag self-made. That last hashtag was going to age like milk in the sun. I saw movement at the entrance, the kind of movement that makes everyone's heads turn instinctively. A man in a gray suit had walked in, and he had that unmistakable air of authority that comes from years of bureaucratic power. He wasn't dressed for a party. He was dressed for business. Serious business. He stopped at the host's stand, flashed some kind of credentials to the hostess, and said something that made her eyes go wide. She pointed toward Claire's table. Oh, this was happening. This was really happening. I walked back inside casually, drink in hand, positioning myself at the bar where I had a perfect view but wasn't obviously watching. The bartender caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. I gave him a small nod that said, "Watch this." The man in the gray suit made his way through the crowd with purpose. People stepped aside for him automatically, the way you do when someone's body language screams, "Official business, move." The jazz band hit a particularly awkward note. I was starting to think they were psychically connected to the drama in the room, and a few people near Claire's table noticed the approaching figure. Conversations started to die down. That thing happened where the silence spreads through a room like ripples on water. First, the tables closest to the entrance went quiet, then the next ring of tables, then the one after that, until finally the vacuum of sound reached Claire's table. She was mid-laugh when she noticed everyone staring at something behind her. She turned around, still smiling, probably expecting another well-wisher or maybe a professor coming to offer congratulations. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with a man holding official-looking credentials and an expression that could have frozen hell over. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent room because apparently God wanted to make sure everyone heard this. "Are you Claire Richardson?" Claire's smile faltered but didn't quite die. "Yes? Can I help you?" The jazz band had stopped playing entirely now. Even they knew this was a moment that required complete silence. The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a document. Not a warrant or anything that dramatic, but an official letter with the State Bar letterhead visible even from where I was standing. "Ms. Richardson, I'm Deputy Director James Morrison from the State Bar Administration. I need to speak with you regarding your bar admission application." You could have heard a champagne bubble pop in that silence. Claire's face went from confused to concerned in about half a second. What? My application was approved. I got my admission letter 3 days ago." "Yes," Morrison said, his tone completely professional, completely neutral, completely devastating. "However, we've received information that requires immediate review. Your bar admission has been placed on administrative hold, effective immediately, pending investigation." The word "immediately" seemed to echo in the silent room, even though he'd only said it once. I watched Claire's face drain of color faster than my bank account had drained over the past 5 years. It was fascinating, really, watching someone process the worst news of their life in real time while surrounded by everyone they wanted to impress. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish trying to understand why the water had suddenly disappeared. "What?" The word came out strangled, barely audible. "What do you mean? I don't understand." Morrison held out the document. Claire took it with shaking hands, and I saw Tara lean in to read over her shoulder, along with half the people at the table. Everyone else in the room was craning their necks, trying to figure out what was happening. "Your financial disclosures are under review," Morrison continued, and I had to hand it to him. He maintained perfect professional composure while dropping a bomb that was nuking this woman's entire career before it started. "The board has received information regarding undisclosed support payments during your academic term. Specifically, substantial financial support from your spouse that wasn't properly disclosed in your application." Every head in that room turned toward me simultaneously. It was like a choreographed dance move, this unified swivel of about 50 people all looking at the guy leaning against the bar with an old-fashioned in his hand. Claire's eyes found mine across the room, and I saw the exact moment she realized what had happened. The exact moment she understood who had made that call, who had provided that information, who had just systematically dismantled everything she'd worked for. Well, everything we'd worked for. But semantics. I raised my glass to her. Just a small gesture. A little salute. The kind of thing you do when you want to say cheers without actually saying anything at all. Her face transformed from shock to pure fury so fast, it was almost impressive. "You," she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You didn't." "Oh, I did," I said cheerfully, projecting my voice across the room, because if we were doing this, We were doing it right. Guess the lowlife finally took a picture, just not the one you expected. More of a screenshot, really, of 5 years of financial records. Someone gasped. I think it was Tara, but it could have been any of the dozen people whose mouths were hanging open. Morrison cleared his throat, reclaiming control of the situation. Ms. Richardson, I understand this is difficult timing, but the board takes disclosure violations very seriously. Failing to properly report financial support during your academic term raises significant concerns about character and fitness, which, as you know, are essential requirements for bar admission. This is insane, Claire said, her voice rising. She looked around at her friends, her professors, her future colleagues, all of them watching her unraveling in real time. He's doing this because you called me a lowlife? I offered helpfully. Yeah, that didn't help. But mostly I'm doing this because you committed fraud on your bar application. The personal vendetta is just a nice bonus. It's not fraud, she shouted, and I saw Morrison's eyebrows raise slightly. Shouting at bar officials probably wasn't the best strategy, but I wasn't about to interrupt her self-destruction. You declared yourself as financially independent, I said, still calm, still casual, like we were discussing the weather. You claimed minimal support. You failed to disclose that your spouse paid your tuition, your rent, your car payments, your insurance, your groceries, your bar prep course, and pretty much everything else for 5 years. That's called material misrepresentation, sweetheart. You should know that. You studied law. Morrison nodded slightly, confirming my assessment. The board will conduct a full investigation. You'll have an opportunity to respond to these allegations and provide documentation. However, until this matter is resolved, your license to practice law in this state is suspended. Suspended. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The law firm representatives who'd been schmoozing with Claire earlier, the ones who'd probably offered her a job, who'd been talking about partnership tracks and corner offices, suddenly found reasons to be somewhere else. They started backing away like she was radioactive, pulling out their phones, probably texting their HR departments about rescinding offers. The dean of the law school, who'd been proudly posing for photos with his star graduate 30 minutes ago, cleared his throat awkwardly and headed for the exit faster than my self-respect had left on the night I realized my marriage was over. Her classmates just stared, some in shock, some in poorly concealed schadenfreude. Because let's be real, nobody makes it through law school without making a few enemies, and Claire had definitely made her share with that self-made attitude. I finished the rest of my drink in one long sip. The old-fashioned was perfectly balanced, sweet, bitter, strong, smooth. Kind of like revenge, actually. You know what's funny? Well, not funny haha, more like funny in that dark, cosmic justice kind of way. Claire's face drained of color faster than my bank account had over the past 5 years. And trust me, my bank account had drained pretty damn fast. We're talking emergency level, red alert. Sir, your card has been declined, levels of fast. But watching her standing there, holding that official letter with shaking hands, her perfect graduation party crumbling around her like a sandcastle at high tide, that was a speed I'd never seen before. It was like watching someone age 10 years in 10 seconds. The board has both the authority and the obligation to place admissions on hold pending investigation. The words character and fitness landed like a slap. I saw several of her classmates exchange glances. In the legal world, those words were basically code for, we think you might be a lying liar who lies. Character and fitness reviews were what happened when the bar thought you'd done something shady. It was the investigation they launched when they suspected you weren't trustworthy enough to be a lawyer, which, given that lawyers aren't exactly known for their overwhelming trustworthiness, was saying something. But I didn't. I mean, the support payments. Claire's voice was getting higher, more desperate. She looked around at the crowd of people watching her, and I could see the panic setting in. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be her night, her triumph, her moment to shine and show everyone that she'd made it. Morrison held up a hand, cutting her off with a gesture that was somehow both polite and absolutely final. Ms. Richardson, I strongly advise you to consult with an attorney before making any statements. Anything you say right now could impact the board's investigation. The irony of needing to hire a lawyer when you just spent 5 years becoming one wasn't lost on anyone in that room. A few people, the ones with less social awareness or more schadenfreude, actually snickered. Someone tried to cover it with a cough, but we all heard it. Claire's eyes found mine again across the room, and if looks could kill, I'd be dead about 17 times over. The fury in her expression was almost beautiful in its purity. This wasn't just anger. This was the rage of someone who'd been caught, who knew exactly who'd caught them, and who was realizing in real time that there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. "You ruined me," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Several people gasped at the outburst. Morrison took a subtle step back, probably trained to recognize when someone was about to completely lose it. I set my empty glass down on the bar with a soft clink that somehow carried across the silent room. When I spoke, my voice was calm, conversational, like we were discussing what to have for dinner, not the systematic destruction of her legal career. "No, sweetheart," I said. "I didn't ruin you. You ruined you. I just made sure the right people knew about it. There's a difference. It's subtle, but it's there. You probably would have learned about it in legal ethics if you'd paid more attention instead of assuming the rules didn't apply to you." Her hands balled into fists, crumpling the letter from the bar. "You're doing this because I called you a lowlife. This is revenge. This is consequences," I interrupted, and my voice got a little harder. "This is what happens when you commit fraud on official documents. This is what happens when you claim to be self-made while someone else is literally making you. This is what happens when you forget that the boring, reliable guy you married isn't actually stupid. He's just patient. And honey, my patience ran out about the same time you decided to humiliate me in front of 50 people." The officer, Morrison, cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable with the marital drama unfolding in front of him, but also probably fascinated because this was way better than whatever he'd planned to do on a Saturday night. "Ms. Richardson, you'll receive formal notification within 24 hours outlining the specific allegations and the investigation process. You'll have an opportunity to respond in writing and provide any documentation that might be relevant." Claire wasn't listening to him anymore. She was staring at me with this expression that I'd never seen before. It was like she was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. Not as the convenient ATM, not as the supportive background character in her success story, not as the boring but reliable husband who'd always be there to clean up her messes and fund her dreams. She was seeing me as someone who could fight back, someone who had power, someone who'd just proven that underestimating people has consequences. And she was terrified. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered, and for just a second, she sounded like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, human, almost sympathetic. Almost. "How could I?" I repeated, and I laughed. Actually laughed. "Claire, I worked 3 jobs for 5 years so you could go to law school. I paid every bill, every tuition payment, every bar prep fee. I ironed your blazers at 3 in the morning because you had early court simulations. I proofread your papers. I made you dinner when you were too stressed to function. I held you when you cried about exams. I believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself." I took a step closer, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. "And tonight, at your graduation party, when I showed up with flowers and pride and the naive hope that maybe you'd want to take one picture with the man who made all of this possible, you called me a lowlife. In front of everyone. You looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't worth being photographed with." The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Even the bartender had stopped moving. "So yeah," I continued, "I made a phone call. I told the truth. I made sure the people who needed to know about your financial situation actually knew about it. Because here's the thing about being a lawyer, Claire, it requires honesty. It requires integrity. It requires admitting when someone helped you instead of pretending you did it all yourself." Morrison was nodding slightly, and I could see a few of her former classmates looking at her with new understanding. The story was rewriting itself in real time. An hour ago, she was the self-made success story. Now she was the woman who'd committed fraud to hide the fact that her husband had funded her entire education. Tara, who'd been frozen in shock this whole time, finally found her voice. "Claire, is this true? Did Marcus really pay for everything?" Claire's jaw clenched. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Another classmate, some guy I vaguely recognized from a study group that had met at our apartment, the apartment I paid for, spoke up. "Wait, so when you told us you were working your way through school?" "I was studying." Claire snapped. "That was my work. That was my contribution. Just because I wasn't physically working some meaningless job doesn't mean I wasn't working." Oh, this was getting good. "So let me get this straight. I said, and I couldn't keep the amusement out of my voice. You consider studying to be equivalent to me working 3 actual jobs? That's interesting math. Let's break it down for everyone here, shall we? Morrison looked like he wanted to stop this, but honestly, he was probably too fascinated to intervene. Plus, everything I was saying was just providing more evidence for his investigation. I worked 40 hours a week at an IT firm. I continued, counting on my fingers. Another 25 hours bartending. Another 15 to 20 driving for Uber. That's roughly 80 to 85 hours of actual, paid employment per week. Claire studied. What would you say, honey? 40 hours? 50 on a busy week? And somehow, in your mind, that makes us equal partners. A few people were pulling out their phones now, probably doing the math themselves, or maybe recording this for posterity. This was the kind of drama that would be talked about in legal circles for years. The graduation party that turned into a public trial. You're humiliating me, Claire said, and now there were actual tears forming in her eyes. The makeup she'd so carefully applied was starting to run. No, I said firmly. You humiliated yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows why. The law firm representatives who'd been courting her earlier? Gone. Vanished like smoke. The professors who'd been singing her praises? Heading for the exits with sudden urgent phone calls to make. Even some of her friends were starting to edge away, distancing themselves from the disaster. I looked around the room at all the faces staring at us, some shocked, some entertained, some deeply uncomfortable. This was going to be legendary. This was going to be the story people told at legal conferences. Remember that woman who got her bar admission suspended at her own graduation party? By her husband? The one she called a lowlife? I walked past Claire, past Morrison, past the wreckage of her perfect evening. As I headed for the door, I had one more thing to say. Oh, and Claire. I turned back to look at her one last time. I'll send everyone the bill for the champagne. Since apparently you're financially independent now, you can handle it. Someone actually clapped. I'm not kidding. Someone in that room of lawyers and law students and legal professionals actually started clapping. Then someone else joined in. And then a few more people. It wasn't everyone. It wasn't even most people. But it was enough to make Claire's face turn from white to red, from shock to mortification. I walked out of that rooftop party while the lowlife she'd mocked became the legend they'd be whispering about for years. The thing about making a legendary exit is that you can't look back. You can't hesitate, can't second-guess yourself, can't let anyone see even a flicker of doubt. You commit to the moment with everything you've got, and you walk out those doors like you're the main character in a movie about justified revenge and personal redemption. And right then, in that moment, I was absolutely the main character. I strode toward the exit with my head high and my conscience surprisingly clear. The scattered applause was still happening behind me. Not a standing ovation, but enough to make the point. Someone wolf whistled. Someone else called out, "You tell her, man," and I heard what sounded like Tara urgently shushing them. As I passed tables of stunned lawyers-to-be, I caught snippets of whispered conversations that were already starting. The narrative was being written in real time, and for once, I was actually in it instead of being edited out. Did you hear what he said about working 3 jobs? She told us she put herself through school. I can't believe she actually said that to him. Is someone recording this? Oh my God, this is going on TikTok for sure. The law firm representatives, the sharks in expensive suits who'd been circling Claire like she was chum in the water, had huddled together near the bar. I caught one of them on his phone, clearly already doing damage control. Yeah, I'm going to need you to pull that offer letter we sent to Richardson. Yes, tonight. I don't care if it's Saturday. Janet, we've got a situation. A situation. That's what 5 years of my life had been reduced to. A situation that needed managing. The dean of the law school, Professor something or other with the impressive credentials and the reputation for being tough but fair, was speed-walking toward the exit like his tenure depended on getting out before things got worse. He'd been so proud earlier, posing with his star student, probably already planning how to use her success story in recruitment materials. Now he looked like a man who'd just realized his prize horse was actually a donkey in disguise. I reached the doors and pushed them open, stepping out into the hallway that led to the elevators. The cool air from the building's AC hit my face, and I realized I was grinning. Actually grinning like an idiot. When was the last time I'd smiled, really smiled, without forcing it? When was the last time I'd felt something other than tired, stressed, or vaguely disappointed? The elevator dinged, and the door slid open. I stepped inside and hit the button for the ground floor. As the doors started to close, I caught one last glimpse of the party through the glass walls of the venue. Claire was still standing there, surrounded by people, but looking completely alone, holding that letter from the bar like it was a death sentence. Morrison was talking to her, probably giving her more official instructions that she wasn't hearing because she was too busy processing the fact that her entire future had just been suspended. The doors closed, and I was alone in the elevator with my reflection in the polished metal walls. I looked at myself. Navy blazer, slightly rumpled from leaning against the bar. No flowers anymore, because I'd left them on her table like a funeral arrangement for our marriage. I looked tired. I looked older than 38. But I also looked satisfied in a way I hadn't felt in years. My phone buzzed. Multiple times. Like aggressive buzzing that suggested my entire contact list had suddenly decided I was the most interesting person they knew. Chris, dude. What did you do? Jake. Yo, Sarah just texted me about what happened. You're a legend. Rachel. Marcus, call me. Now. I need details. Lisa from work. I told you. I told you she was using you. I'm sorry, but also I told you. And then, the one that made me laugh out loud in the empty elevator. Unknown number. This is going viral. Someone posted the video. You're trending on Twitter. Hashtag #LowLifeLawLesson. I clicked on the link they'd sent, and sure enough, there it was. Someone, probably multiple someones, had recorded the whole thing and posted it online. The video started right at the moment Morrison walked up to Claire's table and ended with me walking out to scattered applause. The caption read, Law school grad calls husband a lowlife at her party. Husband works for State Bar and gets her license suspended on the spot. The revenge is immaculate. Fire. It already had over 50,000 views, and I'd only been in the elevator for 2 minutes. The comments were exactly what you'd expect from the internet. A mix of support, schadenfreude, legal analysis, and people arguing about whether what I did was justified or petty. This is the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. He worked 3 jobs to put her through school, and she called him a lowlife? Actually, if she misrepresented her financial situation on her bar application, that is a legitimate ethics violation. He might have saved the legal profession from someone who lies on official documents. Petty king energy. I'm here for it. My man really said, let me just ruin your entire career real quick, skull. The fact that he stayed calm the whole time makes it even better. Someone get this man a medal and a better wife. The elevator reached the ground floor and the doors opened. I stepped out into the lobby and my phone immediately rang. It was Chris. Are you okay? He asked the second I answered. I'm great, I said, and I meant it. I'm actually great. Marcus, you just nuked your wife's career on her graduation night. That's pretty intense, man. She nuked it herself when she lied on her application. I corrected. I just made sure someone noticed. There's a difference. Okay, but he paused. Are you sure you're not going to regret this tomorrow? When the adrenaline wears off and you realize what you've done. I thought about that as I pushed through the building's revolving doors and stepped out onto the street. The night air was cool and clear, and the city lights were doing their thing. And somewhere behind me in that rooftop venue, Claire was probably still trying to explain her way out of something that couldn't be explained away. You know what I regret? I said into the phone. I regret the 5 years I spent believing that supporting someone meant letting them walk all over me. I regret every time I made excuses for her behavior. I regret not listening to you, to Jake, to Rachel, to Lisa, to everyone who tried to warn me. I regret ironing blazers at 3 in the morning for someone who'd eventually tell me I wasn't worth taking a picture with. I started walking down the street, no particular destination in mind, just wanting to move, to feel like I was going somewhere instead of being stuck in place. But do I regret making one phone call to report legitimate fraud on a bar application? Do I regret making sure she faces consequences for lying about her financial situation? Do I regret standing up for myself for once in 5 years? I laughed. Not even a little bit, man. Not even a little bit. Chris was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, I hear you. You need anything? Want to grab a beer? You probably shouldn't be alone right now. Actually, I said, I think alone is exactly what I need to be. I've spent 5 years not being alone, not having space to think, always being available for whatever Claire needed. I think I've earned a night to myself. All right, but call me if you change your mind. And Marcus? Yeah. That was the most epic thing I've ever witnessed secondhand. I mean, it was brutal, but it was also kind of beautiful in a weird, justice served kind of way. I smiled. Thanks, man. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I hung up and kept walking, phone still buzzing with texts and notifications. The video was up to 200,000 views now. Someone had made a TikTok set to "Before He Cheats," except the lyrics were changed to "Before She Graduates." Another person had created a whole thread analyzing the legal implications of what Claire had done and why I was technically right to report it. I was trending. Me, Marcus Hale. Boring, reliable, 3 jobs working Marcus Hale was trending on social media because I'd finally stood up for myself. A notification popped up. Claire was calling. I looked at her name on the screen, watched it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I did something that felt almost as good as walking out of that party. I declined the call and blocked her number. My phone immediately rang again, her mother this time. Mrs. Richardson, who'd always treated me like I was lucky to be married to her daughter, who'd never once thanked me for supporting Claire through school, who'd probably been at that party watching the whole thing unfold. I blocked her too. Then Claire's father. Blocked. Tara. Blocked. I was on a blocking spree, and it felt amazing. Every number that represented that toxic world I'd been living in got deleted from my life with a single tap. By the time I reached the corner, my phone had finally stopped buzzing quite so aggressively. I found a bench and sat down, just breathing, just existing in a moment that belonged entirely to me. A woman walked by walking her dog, some kind of designer breed that probably cost more than my car, and the dog stopped to sniff my shoes. The woman looked at me, then did a double take. "Oh my God," she said. "You're the guy from the video. The low-life law lesson guy." I blinked. "I've been out of that party for less than 10 minutes. How do you already?" She held up her phone. "It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Reddit. You're like internet famous right now." She paused. "That took guts, what you did. My ex-husband did something similar to me. Used me to get through business school, and then traded me in for someone younger the second he got his MBA. I wish I'd had the chance to do what you did." "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said, and meant it. "Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me, honestly. Got rid of dead weight and found myself again." She smiled. "You're going to be okay. Better than okay, probably. Any woman worth having will see what you did and respect the hell out of it." Her dog finished sniffing my shoes, and they walked off, leaving me alone on the bench with that thought. Any woman worth having will respect what you did. I pulled out my phone one more time and opened Twitter. The video was still climbing, 500,000 views now. Someone had edited it with dramatic music. Someone else had made it into a meme format. A bunch of verified accounts were commenting on it. And then I saw it. An article already published on some online legal news site. The headline read, "Man called lowlife at wife's graduation party teaches everyone about legal ethics and karma." I was the story. After 5 years of being edited out, I was finally the story. And you know what? It felt pretty damn good. The next morning, I woke up to my phone absolutely losing its mind. Like nuclear meltdown levels of notifications. I'm talking hundreds of texts, missed calls, voicemails, Instagram DMs from people I hadn't spoken to since high school, Facebook friend requests from strangers, and even a LinkedIn message that just said, "Yo." That was cold-blooded, and I respect it. I made coffee, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion, and honestly, destroying your wife's career at her own party counts as special, and settled in to read through the carnage. Claire's mom was first. "How could you humiliate her like that? After everything she's done for you? You're a spiteful, petty man, and I hope you're happy with yourself. After everything she's done for me." That was rich. What exactly had she done for me besides let me work myself half to death while she studied? The audacity was truly breathtaking. Claire had apparently created a new number just to text me. "You ruined my life. I hope you're proud of yourself. 5 years together, and this is how you treat me? I can't believe I ever loved you." Her professor, the one who'd speed walked out of the party, had somehow gotten my number. "Mr. Hale, what happened last night was unexpected. The university would appreciate your discretion moving forward." Translation: "Please stop making us look bad for graduating someone who committed fraud." And then my favorite text of all came from one of her ex-classmates, someone named Derek who I vaguely remembered from study groups. "Dude, you're trending on TikTok. The low-life law lesson." Someone made a remix of the video with that She Belongs to the Streets song. It has 1.2 million views. This is incredible. I clicked the link he sent. Sure enough, there it was. The whole scene, professionally edited with dramatic music, slow-motion effects on Claire's face when Morrison said suspended, and text overlays pointing out the best moments. The comments were absolutely savage. 3 weeks later, I moved into a new apartment overlooking the river. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, big windows that let in actual sunlight, the kind of place I could have never afforded when I was funding someone else's dreams. It was peaceful, quiet, and 100% drama-free. No blazers to iron, no tuition bills to pay, no passive-aggressive comments about how I wasn't ambitious enough. Claire's bar suspension made headlines in legal circles. Turns out, misrepresenting your financial situation on official documents is exactly the kind of thing that makes licensing boards very, very angry. Her investigation was ongoing, but word on the street, courtesy of Derek, who'd become my unexpected source for law school gossip, was that she'd need to wait at least a year before reapplying, and even then, she'd have to explain the ethics violation to every potential employer forever. She called me one last time, crying, begging for forgiveness. Asked if we could start over, if I'd help her fix this, if maybe I could talk to the board on her behalf. I told her what I should have told her years ago. I don't hold grudges, Claire. I just keep receipts. When she asked if we could reconcile, I smiled into the phone. Sure. Right after you graduate from Humility School. I hear they have a great program. Very intensive. She hung up. These days, I mentor young entrepreneurs at a local business incubator, teaching them about protecting their assets and their hearts. I tell them my story, all of it, and watch them take notes like their lives depend on it. Because sometimes they do. Last week, I went back to that rooftop bar. Same place, different energy. The bartender recognized me immediately and grinned. Another old-fashioned, heavy on the irony. I smiled back. Make it a double. I'm celebrating. Celebrating what? My degree, I said, settling into my seat. PhD in poetic justice. Just graduated.